carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Absolutely fabulous to have your company today. And whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's great to have you join us. By the way, I always mention all of those every hour, just in case you didn't know you could do it in a different way. Lots of people saying, oh, I can't see you anymore. I don't know why you think that, but nevertheless, you know, if you want to, you can watch us on YouTube or your connected device. We are still visual in whole, 3D and everything. But if you're just listening on DB Plus Radio and you've been around for a long time, always grateful to have you on board. Thank you very much. I bet you can't guess what we're going to talk about today. No, really. Yeah, Britain's economy contracted by 0.3% at the start of the second quarter. That's this year. Official figures have shown today it's a blow for the Chancellor after her spending review when she splashed the cash. Rachel Reeves has been accused of returning to Labour's tax and spend approach last night as the Chancellor set out her plans to invest, she says, £4 trillion over 3 years to fund the renewal of Britain. However, no one's quite sure how it's going to be paid for, other than, I can assure you, 100% right now, taxes will go up in the autumn. And if you think it's just going to be on the other people over there, those rich people over there, it won't, because there aren't enough of them. They're already paying a shed load of tax. And if you tax them too much, they will leave. Just warning you right now. But also, crucial today, Rachel Reeves has sparked fury by vowing to end migrant hotels by 2029. Now, given that this was a manifesto pledge in July, people might have thought it might have happened at some point during the term as opposed to by the end of the term. No one actually thinks this is really going to happen. We got them out of the 5- and 4-star hotels. Now they're in 1-, 2- and 3-star hotels. But actually what's really happening is they're being put into private accommodation, which pushes up rents and for local people, and of course, they're still here in the country. And even by 2029, the figures state that taxpayers will still be forking out £2.5 billion a year on asylum costs. So we'll be talking about that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that. Also going to be talking about the surrender of Gibraltar. After a deal was struck yesterday, we talked about it on the show, that allows Spain to check passports on the rock, which is weird because Spain and the EU don't have any sovereignty over Gibraltar. They agreed the deal with Europe and Madrid that would place Spanish border officers at the airport and ports of the British territory as part of a dual entry system. It does mean, as MJ has been discussing this morning, that you arrive from Britain to another part of British territory, Gibraltar, you will actually be seen by a Spanish or other EU customs officer, passport officer, rather than a Brit or Gibraltar. Yeah, and as Mike's just been discussing, is it a back door into spending rather more time in the EU than our current passports allow? We're going to be talking about all of that, an awful lot to go. Don't forget, if you miss any of the show, you can go to my YouTube page. It's cunningly called, you can't work this out, can you? The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. And if you hit subscribe, you will never miss a thing. Right now, let me introduce you to Philip Ingram, MBE, of course, former Senior Military Intelligence Officer, who joins us today. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Lovely to speak to you, and great to have you here to talk about a number of different topics.
Stuff's been going on.
Stuff's been going on.
Oh,
before we get to the stuff that's been going on, and indeed the question particularly I want to put to you, our lovely audience, just some breaking news. This is very worrying. A plane carrying 242 passengers that was heading to Gatwick Airport in in London, or south of London, has crashed near the airport in Ahmedabad in Western India. There are reports that the plane was, as I say, heading to Gatwick Airport. We're awaiting further details. Of course, it's very likely there'll be Brits on board that plane. We'll bring you any details as soon as we hear them on the state of that story and whether or not there are any casualties. Obviously, just fingers crossed right now that this is not too awful an event. But a plane carrying 242 passengers has crashed near an airport in Ahmedabad in Western India. Right, Philip, let's talk about key issues that came out in the spending review. Question I'm putting to our audience, actually, you can obviously get in touch about any of the stories we're talking about, in particular anything about the spending review. We had a bit of it live yesterday, although we got Peter Caldwell in the studio to listen to it, so we didn't have to take it live because
he likes that sort of stuff.
He likes that sort of stuff. He gets very excited about it in a way that when I was political editor, I never did. I haven't got that. Not quite that excited about it, especially it's Rachel Reeves. But also because we didn't want everyone to switch off for obvious reasons, because listening to Rachel Reeves. She announced the spending review, but one of the things she did announce the spending review, we'll go through other issues, you'll say, is the migrant hotels basically will be closed by 2029, at the end of this Parliament. I mean, look, that's 4 years longer, still paying a fortune for them. We all know what's going to happen to these people. They're not going to be sent home. So I want to know, do you believe, A, that Rachel Reeves is going to close the migrant hotels by 2020. I mean, the Tories said they were going to close them. Do you believe it'll happen? And also, where do you think all those people will go? They're all going to be sent home to Iran and Afghanistan or sent to Rwanda or Albania? What do you think? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Philip, what's going to happen to them?
Well, I've got the solution. If the government does it, nothing's going to happen, and they're going to go, there's so many difficulties, and we're going to be paying more, and it's in the next Parliament and all the rest of it. But that change in law, where fears that tented cities as rough sleeping is decriminalised at the end of a 200-year-old law, why don't we just hire a few big fields in the middle of nowhere, put lots of tents in them, and there you go.
And lots of barbed wire around.
And get everyone out of the hotels, and we could have it done by 2026. That would be a lot cheaper.
We could have it done by the end of this month if we wanted to. But this is the thing. We know that the government has been paying fortunes to companies like Serco to sign up 5-year deals to basically rent landlords, houses of multiple occupancy, these houses, basically it's, bed sits, 1 or 2 to a room. They're paying double the local market rent. Oh, what a surprise. It's really hard for people to find housing when all the cheapest housing is now double the price. Oh, well, then why on earth would we bother, renting to local families? And we also know they're paying, their council tax, all their utilities. It's all guaranteed. We'll pay for refurbs. What's not to like? What's not to like for those landlords? You can understand why they're taking them up on that deal. That's what's going to... If these men, it's largely young men, are going to be moved out of hotels, they're going to be moved into local private accommodation. Also, if they are no longer on the books as asylum seekers because they've been processed, they've either been processed or found to be not eligible. Unlikely, given our record here, but they're not going to be deported because a lot of them from countries like Afghanistan and Iran. We can't deport people to those countries, and we haven't got a deal to send them anywhere else. They'll still be here, and B, they'll just be given not asylum, but indefinite leave to remain, and then they'll just move on to the benefit system. I mean, that's what's going to happen. We're still going to be paying for them.
Oh yes, we're paying for them.
Apart from the rocket scientists and the billionaire entrepreneurs who obviously are among those people arriving on boats.
There have been more have come in since you started collecting statistics. I think it was 2008 on the numbers that have come across. More have come in than we have in the British Armed Services. And that's shocking.
Yeah, that's always an alarming point, isn't it? I really would like to hear from you.
And they're all fighting-age men. Mostly.
Yes, and we will come to that when we talk about Ballymena riots, because we're not talking about asylum seekers in that form, but the concern that local people have about large numbers of young men from countries with cultures which are not necessarily aligned with us. We'll get to that in a moment. I know a lot of people want to talk about that. Let's talk about specific suspension review yesterday. A lot of cash was splashed all over the place yesterday. Still not enough, I would view, by Rachel Reeves to actually change anything. to actually improve things. We're talking about budget up over 3% over the next 2 years to the NHS, £226 billion budget by 2029 for our healthcare service. We are a healthcare service with a small island attached. That's what we are now. But it's already been pointed out that most of the extra budget is going to be taken up with above inflation wage rises for nurses and doctors. Now, you need to pay people enough to get them to come and work in the system. I get that, but is that going to actually improve, the number of appointments that are given, the number, how long quickly you can see a consultant, or how quickly you can get your tests done and your test results back? Is that going to make any difference?
No, none whatsoever.
Okay, moving on.
I saw an interesting, and I haven't been able to check this, so please, if I'm sure our listeners will fact check it, but the NHS budget is now bigger than the GDP of Portugal.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
But it's shocking when you put it into those terms. And there's no the other thing is there's no efficiencies attached to any of this. And
that was a key thing. That's something Wes Streeting had promised, and I had quite hopes. Yeah, you get your pay deal, but without a requirement that you do anything else.
Yeah. And this is the big thing. Any government department is extremely wasteful, and the NHS is extremely wasteful.
Most companies have waste, but public sector is off the scale.
It is off the scale because it's not. They don't treat it as their own money, and that's the issue.
I do think that's a big issue, isn't it? Housing, we already knew they were going to get £39 billion over 10 years, so £4 billion a year. Social and affordable housing, defence. Now it was up to 2.6%, not 2.5%. We thought it was going to be, but it's frozen. It's frozen for the next few years. It's not enough.
It's not enough. It doesn't take into account what the Secretary General of NATO has been turning around saying we need to get up to 3.5% plus another 1.5% on investment in other areas. Otherwise, we need to start learning Russian. 2.6% is a bluff. The moving of the single intelligence account, the SIA, which is the successor to what used to be called the secret intelligence vote, and I had some dealings into that in a past life, brought another 0.1%. That's where the 2.5 went to 2.6. Under the NATO rules for counting that as defence expenditure, unless all of those individuals and police and intelligence services are trained in military tactics, it doesn't count.
What a surprise. Yeah, exactly. And we know there are so many concerns about where we are.
Chagos has been put in, the cost of Chagos has been put in.
There has been.
It's front-loaded, and therefore, in real terms, over the first few years, we're having defence cuts.
Which is utterly insane.
Properly insane.
School budget up 0.4% in real terms, and again we've got fewer kids being born. Perhaps one can understand that, but we also know there's a massive extra cost to schooling now. All the IT that it's needed, and of course
and those from private school.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Keir Starmer, one of his many tweets, of course, he never writes himself, he put out yesterday, was saying that they can afford the social housing, investment in social housing, because of VAT on private schools. You think, no, the VAT in private schools are supposed to pay for an extra teachers in classrooms.
Extra teachers, and actually it's costing more.
Yeah, it's crazy. We already knew about the extra 15-odd billion for transport, largely for cities outside of London. I mean, I'm in favour of all that, all the spending on that. The energy, as we'll see, extra 11.5 billion total. It's 14 in total. I'm in favour of that. Again, we talked about the asylum, but we're talking about total spending for the next 3 years, £4 trillion. Day-to-day spending currently is £190 billion. So what it's going to be over that total period, it's going to be £190 billion more than Tory plans. So this is, Labour saying, look, we believe in spending. Capital investment as well is £113 billion higher. Now, we do need to be spending money on a lot of giving. We need to be building reservoirs and nuclear reactors and roads and railways. That actually helps the economy. There is a big difference between investment and day-to-day expenditure. But on top of all that, we've got £100 billion plus a year we're paying just on interest, just the interest on our debt. We've got a huge cost of welfare. I mean, huge cost. We've got the OBR, Office Budget Responsibility, who don't kind of oversee the autumn statement in the same way they don't do a book on it. And they've halved their growth forecast for this year. What a surprise. We saw a fall in GDP in April, 0.3% fall. It was more than they... Again, the forecasts and experts always tell us what they think it's going to be, and they're always wrong. So I don't know why we bother listening, but they did predict a fall. Now, this is going to be largely down to the fact that in April, the National Insurance hike on jobs kicked in. We've also, of course, things looked a bit better at the beginning of the year than they do now. Why? Because Rachel Rees was Chancellor. No, it's because there was a prediction, because Donald Trump had gone on about tariffs, there was a prediction that a lot of the exports to America would face tariffs, as they now do, and that a lot of production was hyped up and a lot of trade and a lot of exports were done deliberately to get those items into America before those tariffs hit. And then you get the sort of post-boom slump. Things are not looking good.
They're not good. And Labour are trying to bring in a lot of stuff they promised in their manifesto, but that was based on there being a 2.5% growth in the economy. It doesn't exist. This has to be paid for somewhere, and it's going to be more and more debt, which is going to mean the interest payments are going to go up, and it's going to be more and more taxes for us.
Yeah. And they are going to go up. But what taxes are going to go up? That's the key thing, because lots of people are in favour of taxes going up for other people, big corporations, taxing the rich more. When you ask me, who do you mean by the rich, and how many of them do you think there are?
Yeah, well, and this is where people don't understand a lot of what's going on. People say, oh, it's the rich shareholders of the utility companies. And I go, you're a shareholder of the utility company. No, I'm not. Do you have a pension? Oh, yeah, I've got a small pension. Where do you think it's invested? So, the people that they're asking to tax more are themselves. If people have got savings, pensions or anything else. And this is where people just don't understand. And that's not helped by the government in its soundbite politics, who want, in particular the Labour Party, want their supporters to think these are rich fat cats that are sitting there on their piles of money, enjoying it and buying only the best wines and eating in the best restaurants and stuff. Those are the ones that are only benefiting. No, it's not. We all benefit from companies making profits. Yeah,
but again, it's this idea that somehow that's bad. That's bad, but no, that's what pays for everything, guys. That's what pays for everything. Now, let's give you an update on these very, very worrying news about a plane carrying 242 passengers crashing near an airport in Ahmedabad in Western India. This was a plane, an Air India jet that was reported to have been heading to Gatwick Airport in London, so highly likely that there would have been Brits on board. But according to the flight tracking website Flight Radar, the plane's final signal was received just seconds after takeoff. The aircraft was lost at 10:08 a.m. local time, less than a minute after takeoff. It had reached 625 feet. Now, we believe it was a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner, and it fell just outside the airport. It had just taken off from Ahmedabad's airport perimeter. The aviation minister for India has said they are on the highest alert, and rescue teams have been mobilised. Now, some pictures have emerged of large plumes of very dark grey smoke from the site of the crash. Obviously, we're going to get you any information we can as soon as we get it. But 242 passengers believed to be on board, believe crew as well, and a site of a crash obviously in India, but a flight that was heading to Gatwick Airport south of London. We'll keep you up to date on that. So as soon as we get more information, we will bring it to you. Let's talk about where, well, there's certainly been an awful lot of trouble going on in Ballymena. Now, you're a man from Northern Ireland, Mr. Ingram. First of all, I mean, again, it's always interesting when if you look at just at the BBC website or something you see something a couple of days ago about Ballymena. What's going on? Oh, riots, racist riots. You immediately go, oh, I wonder what this is actually about. And actually what originally sparked this was the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl. 2 14-year-old boys appeared in court. They have been accused of a sexual assault against this girl. They have denied the charges. They needed a Romanian translator in court. So I think we can safely say they weren't born in Northern Ireland because they don't speak English. Trouble started, so apparently this is not the first. There's been reports that it's the second or third sexual assault in the matter of a couple of weeks from alleged to be perpetrated by newer arrivals to the city, to the town. We've seen people attending a protest, a couple of thousand people, a protest about, look, you've not listened to us. People say they've gone to politicians. We'll be talking to a local politician very soon in the show. They've gone to the politicians and say, look, the mass influx of people we know Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland has been extraordinary in recent years. In terms of the local population relative, it's been on a bigger scale than actually is happening in large parts of the UK, of mainland Britain, sorry. But this soon escalated, and we've had 3 nights now of actual riots. A lot of the people getting involved, attacking the police. People then attacking a leisure centre where there was still sort of yoga classes, goodness knows what are going on, but also some local Romanian families had been removed to this leisure centre from their own homes for their own safety. People have been putting up signs outside their doors saying, local family lives here, i.e. don't attack my house. Now, this is obviously unacceptable. This is obviously should be condemned by all right-thinking people. You can't throw bricks, set fire to attack local families, local people, whoever it is. You can't do that. You can't take the law into your own hands. A peaceful protest, I think, would actually make more of give more of a message. But undoubtedly, there are people who are very angry and also very scared, particularly for the young women and girls in their local communities. And they have a right to feel that way without being told they're racist.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. The riots, the behaviour that we're seeing from the crowds, especially with the ages of the individuals that are in there, is totally unacceptable. But protest has been brewing and the authorities have known about it. And Northern Ireland is peculiar. Very polarised, close communities. We have white Anglo-Saxon communities who will fight each other and have been for hundreds of years between Catholics and Protestants. As soon as you then bring in outsiders that are in, that then changes the dynamics, and a lot of these are put into the poorer areas. A lot of the poorer areas around where the housing is, you get that housing price inflation, you get local families being pushed out, people see others getting benefits that they're not getting themselves, and a lot of those areas are still unfortunately controlled by organised crime gangs. Organised crime gangs are all linked to historical terror-related organisations, and there's always been a degree of vigilantism in Northern Ireland. The IRA patrolled their controlled estates and areas during the Troubles. They continue to do that today. The UVF and UDA do the same in the Loyalist areas. And what this is when the authorities didn't listen to the concerns, then those local vigilante groups that are linked to organised crime, that are linked to historic terror organisations, have taken it upon themselves to take action. And this is where it blows up even further.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It really is. Of course, it's going to happen, isn't it? Look, there's plenty more to talk about, and we will talk about more in just a couple of moments, but just going to get up to date on Air India have confirmed that it's flight AI 171 operating between Ahmedabad and London Gatwick was involved. They say with an incident today. There are videos online of the plane taking off and then disappearing from view. Large plumes of smoke. Big concern. 242 passengers on board due to arrive in London Gatwick later today. Obviously expected to be a crew as well, but that flight was lost just after 10 o'clock this morning local time. But we'll bring you any more details on that. We're going to be talking to travel correspondent at The Independent, Simon Calder, up next. Coming up, we are going to be talking more about Ballymena. We're going to be talking about the migrant hotels, the splurge and spend, and where on earth is all the money going to come from to pay for all this extra spending from Rachel Reeves, given we're not seeing the growth that was supposed to deal with it all. The surrender, of course, of Gibraltar, and so looking forward to all those tent cities that we're going to have as we basically say, no, it's absolutely fine. Sleep rough in the street, no longer going to be a crime. Mind you, it's not as if they actually deal with a problem that already exists, is it? But we'll talk about all of that. Stay tuned. Get in touch if you want to have your say on any of the big topics. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
They can't find the gangs. So we know this hasn't worked. So what they've done today is to imply to us, oh, well, it's a great strategy, it's a good policy, it just needed more money. So they have taken £280 million of our money, British taxpayers' money, just to justify the folly of their ludicrous, ineffective, completely failed policy to smash the gangs. That's what they've done.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:28 is the time. Let's get you up to date on events in India. As a plane carrying 242 passengers has crashed near the airport in Ahmedabad in western India. The plane was heading towards Gatwick Airport in London. Let's talk now to Simon Calder, who's travel correspondent at The Independent. Good morning to you, Simon.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, these reports came out just in the last few moments, and some horrific-looking videos of reported showing a plane taking off and then disappearing from the sky. Huge plumes of dark grey smoke. Tell us what we know so far, Simon.
Well, this was a routine flight, Julia, going from Ahmedabad International Airport to London Gatwick. It's one of a number of routes that Air India has recently started in and out of London Gatwick, and the aim is, of course, to fly business travellers and holidaymakers, but also to serve the large community of British people with Indian heritage, with Indian families.
Yeah.
And it's the thing, Julia, which is really, well, obviously this is a tragedy beyond measure, but it also goes very trends we are seeing in international aviation for there to be basically very, very few crashes, let alone
people think of it as that so many people are scared to fly, but it is actually, mile for mile, time spent travelling, the safest form of travel. There are so many areas where safety has been improved over the years, which is why, of course, such horrific stories become news, because they are actually very rare.
Yes, the trend has been very much that every year, tragically, you and I are reporting on some occasional aviation accidents. They tend to be involving smaller propeller planes in less developed countries. And so this is all the more shocking to see a terrible tragedy unfolding, not just for the 242 people believed to be on board this Boeing 787 Dreamliner, but also, of course, for people on the ground who may...
Well, indeed, chunks of the plane's fuselage and tail have been seen protruding from a demolished building. The cause of the crash, we understand, is not yet known. But say some videos that have been posted on social media appear to show the plane descending in a controlled manner with a high nose angle and landing gear deployed, suggesting that they realised there was a problem, the captain and the crew, as soon as they took off and went to land. But of course, they'd already left the perimeter of the airport. And again, I'm going to guess this is a highly built-up area around this airport in Western India. But we don't know yet in terms of the number of survivors. We know 242 passengers on board. There will also be crew as well. And again, given that it was a flight headed for the UK, we not that any loss of life isn't awful, but there'll be many people in the UK worrying about their own relatives. This was flight AI 171. And it was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. And am I right in thinking this is the first ever crash of this particular make of plane?
I haven't absolutely verified that, but the 787 has had an extremely good safety record, and so it is very likely that this will be the first fatal accident involving the aircraft. I mean, aircraft are involved in survivable accidents, really quite frequently, accidents and incidents, and yes, there will be. Understandably, it's only human, enormous amounts of speculation about what happened in this case, ranging from mechanical failure to pilot error to the risk of a terrorist attack. But please let me caution everybody, this is way too early to speculate on the cause. In due course, there will be an absolutely thorough investigation. It will involve not just the aviation authorities in India, but also the US, where the plane was built, and I imagine the UK's Air Accident Investigations branch as well, because there will be tragically British people involved in this. Indeed. As well as the wider tragedy.
Simon Calder, appreciate you joining us at such short notice, travel correspondent at The Independent. Philip Ingram, let me just bring you in. Of course, we don't know the cause of this crash. It does appear that this landing gear was down. There's video footage of this. We don't know yet if there have been any casualties, any fatalities, but obviously some of the visual images we are getting are not looking promising.
It's not, and I've seen a number of the videos. You know, Boeing 787, you know, its call sign was Victor Tango, Alpha November Bravo, took off from India at 09:50 this morning. It seemed to crash. Local time. Not long after taking off, it hadn't even started to retract its undergear from the video that I've seen. Due to arrive in Gatwick Airport at 18:25 local today. And of course, there will be people at the airport waiting for their families and their loved ones, and just waiting for news as to what's happened.
Indeed, absolutely. We'll keep you up to date if we hear anything more on that. We'll be showing you some of the footage that is coming out of India, and it is extremely concerning, with a large explosion it would appear, and large plumes of smoke, and obviously big concerns for all those people on board, more than 242. Look, we're going to take a quick break. After that, we're going to be talking to the new Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Hillsby. That's Sarah Purchin. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Just to say, we'll keep you up to date on that horrific news if you're just tuning in, of a plane carrying 242 passengers heading to London Gatwick here in the UK has crashed near an airport in Western India, Ahmedabad, just seconds after taking off. Huge explosion, huge plume of smoke as it landed hit on the ground. So we're going to keep you posted if we get any developments on that, as we do. Right now, though, let me turn our attention back to British politics, and let's talk to Sarah Purchin. She's She's a MP for Reform UK for Runcorn and Helsby. Very good morning to you, Sarah.
Morning, Julia. Lovely to be on your show
Thank
at last.
Very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's talk about the spending review. Huge amount of cash was splashed by the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, yesterday. Which bits of it do you agree with at Reform and which bits of it you don't agree with?
Yeah, just before we start, can I just say how sorry I am to hear about this awful, tragic plane crash?
Absolutely.
Heart goes out to everybody, and we'll just wait and see how the news comes out. But yes, back to your question, the spending review. Look, Reform have been very clear about this government and how it has lost control of our taxpayers. The taxpayer, our public finances. I mean, this government, it came in with a manifesto that said it was going to increase public spending by 10 billion. In the first 3 months, it's gone up to 60 billion. Out of control. The interest that we're paying on Bank of England loans is just extraordinary. And in fact, Richard Tice, who is our real, numbers man, he is demanding now a meeting with the governor of the Bank of England to discuss this.
And so I have to say, and some very credible people who've been former senior figures of the Bank of England have pointed out this money does not need to be given to these banks.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, Richard's the expert in this area. But the point is there's money being wasted left, right and centre. So not only is spending out of control, but just look what's come out this morning, Julia. The growth of the economy down by 0.3%. And you can see from the headlines everywhere, this is the last thing that Rachel from Accounts as lead causer wanted this morning to hear. So we have all this yesterday. But the fact is, in 1 month, jobs have gone down. The jobs available have gone down in the last month by 109,000. The economy is going to be tanking. The markets will not support this endless spending without any means of where all this money is coming from. They're not proposing, they're not telling us where the money's coming from. The markets will not sustain the situation.
Well, we know where lots of people think that the money is going to be coming from, and that is from tax rises in the autumn. This morning in her sort of post-spending review interview round, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves would not decline, which she declined to say that she wouldn't be seeing 5% council tax rises basically for every year of the next few years. What would you be doing instead? I mean, you can say, look, we should be spending this, should be spending that, but you've been splashing the cash quite a lot. I've been quite happy to support lots of big spending at Reform as well. You're saying you're going to deal with waste, you're going to tackle net zero. Yeah, tick, tick. My audience will love all of that. I do as well. But you also want to spend a lot of money, which frankly isn't accounted for by taxes either. So where would you get the money from for what you want to do?
Look, one of the most important thing about Reform and what we stand for is growing, providing the environment for the economy to grow. So there's things like, why did this Labour government put the national insurance contributions on businesses? That's affecting jobs. That's affecting growth. So, for example, the income tax level, Reform have talked about raising that to £20,000. Now, yes, that's going to cost money, but
it's not going to cost money. It's going to cost an absolute fortune.
But Julia, the trouble with governments is that they're all into short-term policies. Over 5 years, that policy of raising the income tax threshold to £20,000, that creates jobs, it stimulates growth, it gets people back into the workplace. And let's face it, our welfare bill is enormous. That has to be cut. And one of the ways of cutting it is making it worthwhile people I
hate to tell you, there are quite a lot of people, and I know people who work in the benefits offices, the job centres, quite a lot of people who, doesn't matter what work could pay, they're still not going to go and work because they've got free money. So unless that came alongside very strict sticks as well as carrots, as in work's going to be more worthwhile for you, you are going to have to actually take an awful lot of people off those welfare rolls of working age.
And you know what? Reform is the one party that says we will. We are saying the things that this government, the Tories, have done nothing about. I mean, for 14 years, we all know that. But this government is also doing nothing about. But Reform will. We're saying these things and we will do these things, but we need to be in
You're going to need your numbers to add up. I'm not saying any other party's numbers add up, but people are going to need your numbers to add up as well if you're going to be a credible government in waiting. It's very interesting, isn't it, that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor give a lot more name checks to Nigel Farage and Reform than they they do to Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives, clearly seeing you as the opposition. And no wonder then that they make pledges on tackling migration, whether it's illegal or legal. In specifically, a pledge that was issued yesterday, reiterating a Labour Party manifesto pledge from last July, was getting migrants out of those hotels, the Channel migrants out of those asylum hotels, but only by 2029. So they'll still be there for another 4 years. A, do you think that Rachel Reeves and the government will achieve getting migrants out of those hotels? And B, where will those migrants then go?
This is a big issue for me. In my constituency of Runcorn and Helsby, as I think you're probably aware, I have a migrant hotel. It was an issue that was raised with me endlessly on the doorstep. Now, because of the fact it was such a big issue in the by-election campaign, Labour came out and said they would shut that hotel, and they promised to shut all the migrant hotels within a year. That's already gone to 2029. Huge cost to the taxpayer, as we know. But worryingly, Julia, I actually think, and I have to confirm this, and I'm actually going up to the constituency after this interview, but I think there's another one in my hotel that has come in under the radar, people coming and going. I've got people having a look at it. But the point is, these hotels aren't being shut, are they? And like you've just said, if they are shut, where are they going? Well, I'll tell you where they're going in Runcorn. They're going into houses of multiple occupancy. They're going into the scheme that Keir Starmer promoted for private landlords, whereby they get 5 years rent, all the repairs paid for, and as soon as these houses are full of these asylum seekers, they disappear into the community. And I could tell you some horror stories, Julia, about things that my residents have had to put up with and suffer.
Well, tell us.
Well, I've seen CCTV, so I have literally seen the evidence, as has the police, of people coming and going in the night, men coming and going at night in houses of residential areas, drug dealing, knives being carried, taxis with young women being dropped off at night, picked up in the morning. I've had so many stories of parents concerned because their children have been stopped, spoken to, young girls been spoken to, would they like to earn some money? It's absolutely horrific. On the doorstep, one couple, about my age, not a young couple, they wanted desperately to speak to me. They wanted me to go in, which obviously we don't do when we're canvassing, but they were frightened to tell me about their experiences of the house next door because it was full of these asylum seekers. They are terrorising the community in Runcorn. And people will accuse me of, over-egging this and being dramatic.
Oh, they'll accuse you of racism. They'll say you're bigoted, xenophobic, racist. Yeah. That's what...
They're in denial of what's happening. And once these asylum seekers go into these private landlord accommodation, they are lost to the authorities.
OK. In terms of something that's actually happening in the UK right now, Ballymena. We've seen riots 3 nights in a row. No, it's not in your constituency, and it doesn't necessarily concern people who've arrived on these legal Channel migrant boats. But we understand new arrivals in the town of Ballymena have been causing concern to locals. We've had an allegation of a 14-year-old girl being raped. We're told, not raped, sexually assaulted. 2 14-year-olds who needed a Romanian translator appeared in court, denied those charges, of course, and cannot be identified because of their age. There have been riots. There have been attacks on new arrivals, on immigrant population living in Ballymena, some having to take refuge in the local leisure centre. That was then attacked. People throwing firebombs, attacking the police, running riots on the streets overnight. People are forced to put signs on their doors saying, local people live here. What's your reaction to all of that?
It's bound to happen. It's going to happen.
Do you condemn it?
Of course, I don't condone it, but the point is,
you don't condemn it.
I have stories in my constituency of a rape. Two men have been arrested. They're asylum seekers, come out of one of these private landlord accommodation. I can tell you my own stories. I know you said it's
but
not.
But I want to clarify: do you condemn the violence?
I condemn the violence. Of course, I condemn the violence. What I'm saying to you is it's not surprising that people's level of frustration with the government not doing anything about this, being in total denial, as the Conservatives were, but this government is absolutely continuing that. Only reform politicians are brave enough to stand up and say these people need to be removed from this country and sent home.
Can I just ask you, just finally, your new chairman, David Bull, was announced, a great fanfare on Tuesday, and yesterday morning he did a random interview, spoke to us very kindly, my colleague, of course, my friend David Bull, on the show soon after the announcement, but yesterday he was on GMB on ITV. Someone's got to do it, I suppose. And for some reason he spoke for about 2 minutes about his work as a ghost hunter and his experience believing that the ghost and his late grandmother had travelled with him in a car to a hotel and had been channeled through a medium and the like. I mean, I don't know if there's a big vote, a potential vote to be got from people who believe in ghosts. Do you believe in ghosts?
I actually, my faith is very important to me, and I am quite spiritual. I don't necessarily. I saw the clip. Look, we're all different. We all bring different things, and you know, if that's David's thing, then that's what's great about reform. Actually, you know what? We have a bit of fun. We can talk about different issues.
Well, I mean, if you're talking, I mean, with all due respect, you're brand new chairman. You've got loads of issues, people facing difficult issues, and I know GMB is a much rather lighter show, but talking about his experience with what he believes with ghosts rather than, you know, people's ordinary day-to-day experiences dealing with, I don't know, migration and the economy and getting an NHS appointment.
I know. But the point is...
Does it make you look silly?
I don't think so. It makes him... He's a personality. He's a lovely man.
He is.
He also has an awful lot of qualities to bring to the party. Okay. And look, I'm sat here fully briefed and ready to talk to you about the spending review. Right. That's not David's job. David is, David is David, and it's not...
David is David. Just
David
finally, do you regret asking that question at PMQs last week that prompted Zia Yusuf to resign as chairman, calling it a dumb question about whether or not the government would ban the burqa, given that Reform hasn't a policy right now to ban the burqa?
Absolutely not, because we have to be debating these issues, and the one place we should be raising these issues, and Keir Starmer refused to answer my question, he was so rude, is the House of Commons. If we can't raise these issues in the House of Commons, where can we? And actually it is relevant to my constituency. It's relevant to this whole problem, as I said earlier in the interview, of my constituents feeling threatened on their own streets.
Sarah Pochin for Reform UK MP for Runcorn Hills. We very much appreciate you joining us. Hope you'll come back again soon. 10:49 is the time. Quick response to that from Philip Ingram, who's joining me in the studio.
David Bull was playing to the GMB audience. They're not interested in politics and spending reviews. They want to talk about ghosts.
They want to talk about ghosts. Fair enough. We're going to keep you up to date on developments coming out of India after that crash of a plane carrying, we understand, 242 passengers to London Gatwick. It was due to arrive at Gatwick this evening. Very, very big concerns over the level of casualties. The footage that is coming out of a big explosion, huge plumes of smoke, some footage on the ground of the emergency workers. I've got to be honest with you, I'm not hopeful. I think this is an absolutely devastating plane crash. 242 passengers on board that plane from Ahmedabad. I'm going to mispronounce this every time, I do apologise. Ahmedabad in Western India, in Gujarat, heading to Gatwick Airport at about 8 minutes past 10 o'clock this morning. They lost contact with the plane, and then it was videoed heading to the ground. Large plumes of smoke and an explosion have been seen, and emergency services are at the scene. We'll keep you up to date as we know any more details. Up next, we are going to be talking about the surrender of Gibraltar with James Ball from not the New European, they've now called themselves the New World. Citizens of Nowhere. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
They can't find the gangs. So we know this hasn't worked. So what they've done today is to imply to us, oh, well, it's a great strategy, it's a good policy, it just needed more money. So they have taken £280 million of our money, British taxpayers' money, just to justify the folly of their ludicrous, ineffective, completely failed policy to smash the gangs. That's what they've done.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:53 is the time, just to get you up to date. That Air India flight that was heading from Ahmedabad in India to Western India to London Gatwick, due to arrive at about 6 o'clock this evening. 242 people on board. We understand 230 of those are adult passengers, 2 infants, but also 12 crew on board. Just to let you know, it does appear that, according to the manifest, 53 British nationals were on board that Air India flight bound for Gatwick Airport. 53 British nationals. Again, the footage we are seeing from just outside the airport, where the plane crashed just seconds really after takeoff. Very concerning. Of course, huge amount of fuel still on the plane, having just taken off. We'll keep you up to date on any more developments on that as we get them. But right now, let's turn our attention to the surrender of Gibraltar. Announced rather cunningly right in the middle of everyone focusing on what was going on with the spending review. I'm joined now by James Ball, who's political editor of The New World, as was The New European. Good morning to you, James, and it's nice to see you guys focused more on the world and not just Europe. I thought you didn't approve of all that, though.
So, good morning. Well, we listened to you very carefully, Julia, and we knew what you wanted. So
you believe in democracy
listened.
Now and national sovereignty. I'm so happy.
We've always believed in democracy.
You just prefer to hand all our powers over to... you're full on Ramonas. Come on, you're fully in favour of unelected officials in Brussels having the final say on everything that happens in our country, for goodness sake.
I'm generally in favour of democracy quite widely. I just think that if you're in a trading bloc, it probably works better. And I kind of wish that the referendum had been more honest. But we're also happy to look forward. We want Britain in the world, same as everyone else.
We had plenty of conversations about that. Look, let's talk about where we are with Gibraltar. Gibraltar is a British territory. If I fly from an airplane from an airport in England to Gibraltar, I go from a Britain to a British territory. I don't expect to need either to have my passport checked. And if it did have to be checked, well, perfectly reasonable, but it should be British officials that do that, surely. As of a deal signed yesterday by David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, it will be Spanish border officers on behalf of the EU who will be the airport and ports at the British territory as part of what they call a dual entry system, and people will be basically waved through on the land border in return for creating basically a border between Gibraltar and Britain. Now, that's not acceptable, surely.
I think, look, it sounds bad, but there's a reason for it. You know, we changed the relationship between ourselves and the EU. It was always a bit different for Gibraltar. You know, if you've ever been down there, you know that if you need practical things, you kind of have to be able to go from Gibraltar into Spain and back quite easily, especially if you live there. You know, it's a lovely place. It's not full of practical shops and goods for the 21st century. So... the important thing was that Brits living in Gibraltar can live their lives day to day. This makes that easier. Now,
this is because people work and live on either side of the Spanish border and the Gibraltar, and they go to and from for work and for shopping all the time. So they want to make it easy. But the EU could have made it easy. I mean, look, you know, Switzerland isn't in the EU. It's part of the European Economic Area. But, you know, when I come out of Gibraltar Airport and I have to drive through Switzerland to get to, to France, I mean, there's no one checking anything there. They really don't care. So why does it have to be the case at the Spanish border with Gibraltar? They do it because they're bloody minded and they want to punish us. And then we give in to it by saying, OK, you can have Spanish officials checking our passports. We've just surrendered.
There might be an element of that, but Switzerland is landlocked and Gibraltar isn't. And so there's more of a smuggling risk, there's more of a drugs risk, there's that kind of thing. But the EU has the right to patrol its borders. And
they should patrol them a bit better in Greece and Italy and Spain then, shouldn't they?
We have yes, quite. We have very similar arrangements, though, right here at home. When you go on the Eurostar in St Pancras, you cross a French border there that is policed by French officials. They check your passport. They do all the immigration there. And so far, St Pancras doesn't feel that French. I mean, it's got a few patisseries, but it's fine.
Yeah, there is that. But I've got the Eurostar fairly recently. God, in Paris, we've also got, British officials, people checking on that side, haven't we? So it's a quid pro quo.
Yes, it's a dual stamp system, but here that all happens in the same place. That happens either at the port or the airport. There isn't another end because you're not catching a train. This just means that you do both things in the same place. I think people in Gibraltar are very happy about this. This takes a stress off them.
And that should be the first concern. I accept that. It makes their life easier. But the only reason their life needed to be made easier was because the EU and Spain made life difficult, same as they've done for Northern Ireland. They impose far more checks on goods going across the Irish Sea than goods coming in to any other border in Eastern Europe.
We asked for a new relationship.
Yeah, we didn't ask them to be bloody-minded and to punish us for leaving their fabulous club.
But if we do that, Spain, who has always wanted Gibraltar back, is going to kick up. Now, they're not going to be thrilled with this. This makes Gibraltar viable long-term as part of Britain. It protects it within that. Yes, it's part of Schengen. Yes, it's got the movement there. But it's a Eurostar-style check, and it means people can continue to be British, live and work, and get on with it. So
okay. James
this
Paul,
is Keir Starmer making Brexit work again.
Making Brexit. I love he's at least they've accepted Brexit, eh? James Paul, please go into the new world, no longer the new European. Time is running out, so I'm going to get Philip Ingram's response to this after. So somebody who lives in Northern Ireland, lived from Northern Ireland, understanding how difficult life had been made for people in Northern Ireland and traders in Northern Ireland as well. We'll come to Philip Ingram on that. We're going to get to your calls and get to talk about the spending review. We're going to be talking particularly about those migrant hotels that could be open for another 4 more years. But what's going to happen to them if and when those hotels close? And more, of course, on the horrific crash of an Air India flight with 53 British nationals on board and many others. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. If you've been joining us for the last hour, it's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, I really appreciate you joining me. There's an awful lot coming up on the show. One thing we did not expect to be talking about was this horrific plane crash in Ahmedabad in Western India, in Gujarat. A plane carrying 242 people. That's including 230 adults, 2 infants and 12 as passengers and 12 crew, has crashed just near the airport, just seconds after taking off at Ahmedabad in Western India. The plane was heading towards London Gatwick, due to arrive around 6 o'clock this evening. We now know that 53 Brits, British nationals, were on board. There were also 169 Indians, 7 Portuguese and 1 Canadian on board that plane. Absolutely devastating scenes, bearing in mind we are talking about a huge plane, a large airliner, a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner. It's believed, we understand, to be the first time a Dreamliner has actually been involved in a crash like this. Plenty of footage showing the plane leaving the sky, landing gear still down or put down, whether we don't know which, but a huge crash, balls of flames, huge plumes of dark grey and black smoke. We know that the plane has crashed into it appears residential buildings. Concerns not just about those passengers on board, but also people on the ground. Emergency services are at the scene. If you're watching, you'll be seeing some of the footage, really very worrying footage, particularly for those with a family back here in the UK, perhaps planning to head to the airport to pick up loved ones, friends arriving at the airport later today. But that flight very soon after 10 o'clock this morning UK time basically fell out of the sky, and that plane was carrying 242 people, including 230 passengers, and 53 Brits were among those on board. We'll keep you up to date on developments. We'll talk to airline experts about that as we go. Let's also talk about, well, things going badly wrong here after that spending review from Rachel Reeves, where she splashed the cash with no explanation of how it was all going to be paid for. She's been accused of a tax and spend approach. She says she's going to be spending some £4 trillion to fund the renewal of Britain over the next few years. But where the hell is all that money coming from, especially as the economy contracted by 3.3% at the start of the second quarter? So the first figures for April, official figures out this morning, show we saw this economy contracting by 0.3% rather than growing, and this is a sign that we are not going to be getting that 2.5% growth that she has predicated all of our spending plans on. Certainly before the election, it was all about we're going to get growth and that's what's going to pay for everything. Well, that is not happening. We're also going to be talking more about the bid to end migrant hotels. She says they're going to end use of migrant hotels for channel migrants by 2029, the end of this Parliament. Well, they said they'd do it in a year. Previously, it was something that was announced in their manifesto. Well, currently, they're spending more than £4 billion a year on housing illegal migrants. A lot of that, though, is already in private accommodation, private rented accommodation, not in hotels. So what are they going to do with all the people in hotels? Well, that's why I want to ask you today. This vow to end the use of migrant hotels by 2029. A, do you believe her? B, shouldn't it be sooner? And C, where on earth do you think these people are all going to go? Do you think they're all going to be flown back to Afghanistan, Iran, Vietnam, Eritrea, wherever it is they're from? Or do you think they're going to be going to a third country, Rwanda, Albania, who knows where? Or do you think they're going to still be here in private rental accommodation, living next door to you? I'd love to know your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222, and you can get in touch with us on X at Talk TV as well. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Thank you very much indeed for the messages coming in. So obviously we've been taking some doing some coverage obviously of this horrific air crash in India, and obviously that we will get your calls in this hour. I do promise that. Right now, let's introduce Philip Ingram. MBE is a former senior senior military intelligence officer. Lots I want to talk to you about, including the topic we had on just before we got to the top of the news, but I just want to talk to you about this Air India crash. News emerged just as we were coming on air of this, or just as we were on air of this crash, 8 minutes past 10 o'clock. It was UK time, not Indian time that it happened. The visuals we are getting are very, very worrying indeed. 242 people on board, 230 of those are passengers, and 53 of those passengers believed to be Brits. Big concern about anyone making it out alive from what appears to be a crash, a fireball, huge amounts of smoke, landing soon after takeoff.
Huge concern. Tens of tons of aircraft with 58,000 litres of aviation fuel, because it's just taken off. It hasn't burnt any of that off, or very little of it off. Landing on what seemed to be residential areas just outside the airport. The casualties in the aircraft we know because they've got the passenger manifests. It's going to take a long time for the authorities to work out what casualties there are on the ground. But I'm seeing some horrific images coming out of the area.
Yeah, I mean there was that hope earlier on. Some of the footage that the plane, the landing gear was down, and maybe it was an emergency landing, and obviously big concern, but at least perhaps a controlled landing. When you see the footage with the huge explosion, massive fireball in the sky, the big grey plumes of smoke. We know a residential building has been hit. We can see some footage emerging, of fire crews dousing a residential building that's been clearly on fire. Concern not just for those 22 souls on board, but also for people on the ground as well.
Yes, I've seen pictures of the tail of the aircraft sticking out of the side of a building, with the rest of the aircraft broken up. Local press in India are saying that one of the buildings that was hit was, and this is unconfirmed at the moment, was a medical college hostel. Now, it was in the afternoon. Hopefully people will have been out and work and all the rest of it, and casualties on the ground will be minimal because of that. But we know India is so overpopulated in many places that I fear for the numbers that could be killed or injured.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely a massive concern, isn't it? We'll keep you posted on any more developments we do get. Again, 53 British nationals among the 242 on board that plane. Right, now, let's talk about... oh God, I was always going to make a glib joke about the car crash of yesterday, but this spending review, I'm not saying that, the spending review yesterday was an absolute disaster for Rachel Reeves. The headlines are terrible, not helped by the 0.3% fall in GDP in April. Again, everything's predicated on growth, and you ain't got any growth. I mean, not even just low growth, what we had previously. You say, we were the fastest in the G7. I mean, people were doing their exports to America quickly before Trump got in and put in tariffs. That's what they were doing. Things have got worse. In April, they particularly got worse. Of course, that national insurance hike announced last autumn that came in April. Jobs being lost, people not hiring more people. Things are looking bad. No one is feeling the economy in good spirits. Prices still going up. We're told. I mean, Rachel Reeves today was talking about people's wages have gone up more than people's wages have gone up because they're trying to keep pace with inflation. I mean, this is not a good thing. Wages going up when there's low inflation, that's a good thing. Then people are better off. If they're going up and not even by what inflation has been in recent years, people are poorer. They're not. I don't know anyone who feels better off in the last few years. It's just, we had to call it the other day, but that was for the wrong reasons, because some of the policies that Labour brought in, massive hikes to budgets like the NHS. I mean, again, in real terms, small percentages, but massive terms. We're going to have a £226 billion budget for the NHS by 2029. We are a health service with an island attached. Big sums going to housing, defence, education, transport, energy, building this sizable C nuclear reactor. All of that. Now, some of this is good spending. It's infrastructure that we need. Let's build some reservoirs. Let's build some nuclear power stations. Let's build some good transport links between major cities outside of London, where it's really needed. And we need to get those NHS waiting list down. The trouble is, an awful lot of people simply do not believe that any of this is actually going to achieve, a cut in waiting lists, improving the economy, improving schools. There's never any reforms attached to any of this extra spending.
And a lot of it's built on bluff. Growth is based on long-term policies, and therefore the growth that the country is seeing, where the fastest growing in the G7, is based on policies before Labour actually came into government. If we look at bond yields at the minute, we have got the the largest bond yield in the G7, 4.55%, slightly ahead of the United States yield. So it's costing us more money than any other G7 country to borrow the money that's needed to do all of this. A lot of the headlines that have come out from a soundbite perspective as positives. Sizewell, concrete was poured in Sizewell over 10 years ago. This is just allocating money that had already been nominated. And they'll say the previous government hadn't actually found it and given it. Well, Rachel hasn't necessarily found it. She's just giving it.
Yeah.
And we're finding that across the board. Defence, with the increase to 2.6%. Moving the single intelligence account into that is against NATO rules to count against defence at the moment. It's bringing another 4.5 billion that they'll put against defence and say, hey, look, we're bringing more in. But actually, they're bringing the Chagos deal in against defence. That's going to mean a real-time cut. There's so much bluff involved in this.
I mean, that's the thing. And also, how are we going to pay for it? Now, you don't get tax announcements in a spending review. It's just what we're going to spend. It's not just for this year, it's the next few years. And again, a lot of these numbers are skewed by, this is over 1 year, this is over 3 years, this is over 8 years, this is over 10. I mean, it's all meaningless. They do it deliberately so we can't compare things. They want some things to look small and some things to look big, don't they? I mean, that's the thing. Everyone's in favour. Let's spend loads more money. How are we going to pay for it? Largely, people think, we can just borrow more. We can't. We're spending over 100 billion a year just paying the interest. Imagine if your mortgage, I know that household spending and government spending, because the ability to borrow over the long term is different. I get that. But imagine if your mortgage was 100 billion. So before you could spend anything on your heating or going on holiday or, new school uniform for your kids, you had to put 100 billion quid plus just paying the interest. You're not paying off your debts, not paying off your mortgage. That's just servicing those debts. That's going on forever, guys, okay? Unless we get our day-to-day spending down. So we've got that. Welfare exploding, not just pensions, the baby boom generation living longer. That's a great thing, but there's a huge cost to pensions. That's the biggest part of the welfare bill, and more people of working age not working. We've got a huge problem there. But we've also got the small matter of people say, let's tax other people. It's fine. Tax the rich. Yeah, the rich are all paying. The top 1% are already paying 30% of all the tax in this country. I'm not quite sure how much more you're going to get out of people realistically before they just sell up and leave. And we already go, 1 millionaire leaves the country every 45 minutes?
Yeah. Well,
that's not going to work out well for us. Yeah,
and the other thing about tax is you need people in employment to start paying tax, and unemployment rates have gone up. There are less jobs available. So
4.6%.
So Rachel.
That's just the people claiming to be looking for work.
But they're the ones that are going to be most likely to be paying tax back into the economy and not living off welfare to the degree that a lot of people are. So all the stats for Rachel are going the wrong way as she promises all of this money coming from somewhere.
What do you make also of the migrant hotels staying open for 4 more years? We're already paying £4.7 billion a year. Looking after asylum seekers who've arrived on the Channel boats. I mean, come on. This is money we got better ways of spending this money.
The 4.7 billion is at today's numbers of migrants. We're getting 1,000 a day coming in. So that's just going to increase dramatically. It's a recognition by the government that they have no plan to deal with the illegal migrants that are in this.
But they said they would do this. We said they do it in a year. We closed the migrant hotels, and then they started signing all these, as Tories were doing as well, 5-year contracts with companies like Serco to rent homes. But again, houses are multiple occupancy, some of them being converted to that. But basically, these are homes that are not available to other people in the local community.
And rent is going up. Local communities are understandably up in arms about it. I see more and more pictures of veterans living on the streets, and some of them curled up outside migrant hotels in the doorways, whilst people who have done nothing for this country are put up in 4-star accommodation. It's disgusting.
Absolutely. And again, people are just so concerned. And Sarah Pochen, the Reform MP, she made a good point. And it's something, again, it's like something Nigel Farage had talked about years back and was criticised for being, xenophobic, for saying, do you want a whole bunch of Romanians to move in next door to you? And that's what he said. And it was very much criticised of it. And everyone I know was going, well, no, not really. It was a Romanian family. I said, a member of my own family is Romanian. Romanian family moved in, no issue whatsoever. 20 young men who've just arrived on boats from somewhere. No, I don't want them moving in next door to me. And no one does. And stop pretending you do. And it's not about about Romanians, about anyone from abroad. Why would I want a whole bunch of young men moving in next door? I mean, I don't want them if they're Brits, frankly. But we know Sarah Pochin talked about the difficulties that a lot of people are having. And again, something Alex Phillips, our colleague, who's talked about, and again people just shout the bigot word. Oh, it's easy to shout it. But the concern that people have, and every young woman I know says they're facing this, particularly in London as well, with a huge number of people who have arrived, is men clearly speaking with foreign accents who are arriving in this country, whether legally or illegally, who have a very... I'm not saying that British men are all perfect, but they have perhaps even lesser understanding of what would be an acceptable way to approach or speak to a woman and what their expectations are of young women and how they dress and the messages they're giving out in their clothing. I mean, it is a big worry. And we've got that issue, have we not, in terms of Ballymena? You're from Northern Ireland, as people may have guessed from the accent. And there is this issue in Ballymena where everyone's talking about all these, these horrible racist riots. And absolutely, you should not be on the streets attacking a leisure centre because Romanian families have been housed there for their own safety. You should not be attacking people's homes, throwing bricks, firebombs, fireworks at the police. Full stop, end of, condemn that, 100%. A peaceful protest is always more powerful. It's always more powerful, and you don't lose the moral high ground. But this all started because of people's concerns about... It was either the second or third, but we certainly know this, a sexual assault, serious sexual assault on a 14-year-old girl. 2 14-year-old boys appeared in court, can't be named. Obviously, they have denied the charges. They pleaded not guilty, the first plea hearing, but they needed Romanian translators. These are new arrivals to the local area. People have been talking about their concerns over the number of new arrivals, whether legal or illegal, arriving, saying, look, we just cannot cope with this many new arrivals in our community, the concerns about sexual assaults by certain members of these new communities. And people say, and it's interesting watching all the information on this online, people are saying, look, we've tried talking to our local representatives, we've tried raising this, we talked to the police, and no one's listening.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. And there's a history of vigilantism in the very poor communities that a lot of the migrants are being put into, and these families that are in there. And whenever those vigilante organisations, which are linked to organised crime, which are linked to former terrorist organisations, are not getting the authorities to step up, they stimulate this. And the level of rioting, you look at what the police have gotten in Northern Ireland. They've got armoured Land Rovers, they've got water cannon they're using, and they've been firing baton rounds. Those have never been used in the mainland United,
No, I remember the big
United
fuss
Kingdom.
when Boris Johnson ordered water cannon.
Ordered water cannon. And we saw the lessons that came out of Southport, where the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police then came out very quickly to make statements. We've heard nothing from the Chief Constable of the PSNI, and it's his police officers on the front line that are facing the brunt of this.
Yeah. But we've had I think the political leaders, everyone else, just saying, these are racists. These are racists on the street. Yes, there will be some racists on the street. There are some racists in every walk of life, from all backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds and national backgrounds. So, but the concern initially started. And there'll be people again like the Southport riots, where people, frankly, and again, were they stirred up by the far right? Well, actually, even the police investigations into this, His Majesty's Inspector of the Constabulary rules, it wasn't that. It was, it was kind of thuggery on the ground. But the initial protest, the vigil, was about the girls who were killed and who were maimed in the Southport attack by Axel Cabana, the lack of accurate information, the distortion of information that went out, and concern that no one is listening to people's day-to-day concerns.
I've been talking to experts this morning about politics in Northern Ireland and about influences that are in them. There is definitely external influence going into the local groups, the local vigilante groups, and it's being stirred up, and that's external from the United Kingdom. And that influence has been there for a long, long time. And any opportunity to try and create political difficulties in an area where there's real political difficulties is being exploited.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get in touch. Love to hear your thoughts on all this. We're going to be speaking to a Northern Ireland politician about this, Paul Froud, DUP MLA for North Antrim, about this coming up in the next half hour or so. Just to get you up to date, though, on where we are in terms of that plane crash, horrific plane crash in Western India. 230 adults on board. We believe, Air India have confirmed 53 British nationals on board. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has said the scenes emerging of a London-bound plane carrying many British nationals crashing in the Indian city of Ahmedabad are devastating. He said he's being kept updated as the situation develops. The King has also issued a statement from Buckingham Palace saying that the King is being updated as well. We're going to be talking to aviation journalist William Hallowell about that up next. If you want to go getting in, do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Banned Rwanda. They said they need to find an alternative. They've done nothing about it, and now they're saying 2029. From smash the boats to let them all in, and let's let fly with more borrowing, more tax. She is the Klarna Chancellor, Jeremy, because it's spend now, pay later.
Three payments, Klarna Reeves. I like that. That's a new name.
She just spend. And if only it was for a purpose.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Devastating news this morning, just a few moments after we came on air. Within a minute of taking off from an airport in India, an Air India flight carrying 242 people, passengers and crew, crashed near the airport in Ahmedabad in Western India, carrying 53 British nationals on board. Devastating scenes, absolutely devastating scenes of that flight, AI 171, due to arrive in London Gatwick Airport at 6:25 this evening. Massive big ball of fire explosion as the plane hit the ground. Big plumes of smoke. Emergency services are on the scene. We have obviously big concerns about those on board the plane, but also big concerns about those on the ground as well, because of course some of the footage is showing some apartment buildings, a plane literally hitting an apartment building, massively built up area in that local area just outside the grounds of the airport. As you'll be seeing on air right now, some footage of the plane having just taken off and then just disappearing from view, a huge fireball being seen and as it hit the ground, and then big plumes of smoke. Well, let's talk to William Hallowell, who's an aviation journalist and joins us now. Good morning to you, William.
Morning, Julia. Thank you very much for having me on.
Can you just tell us just a little bit more detail about this plane and the circumstances in which a plane could actually, fall from the sky in this way soon after takeoff?
Well, firstly, I think it's important that we don't speculate on the cause at the moment. No. As far as I'm aware, there haven't been any reports about what exactly caused the crash. No. What we do know is that the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, it crashed within about a minute of taking off from about a height of 625 feet, which is, it's not obviously massively high compared to how high it's going to fly up, but it's probably, we don't know how many fatalities have come out of the incident yet, but as you said, 53 Brits, about 169 Indian nationals. It has been reported as well that the pilots had about 10,000 hours of flying experience between them.
And
so
is that
experienced.
a lot? That would make them very experienced.
Yes, it would. Yes. I mean, the other information we know, all flights have been cancelled or postponed. Sorry, at Ahmedabad Airport at the moment. But like I said, I think it's important that speculation is kept to a minimum at this point.
Well, indeed. I know this particular aircraft, Boeing 778 Dreamliner. Is it right to say that this is the first time we've seen a crash involving this particular aircraft?
That's something that people have been reporting. Obviously, there have been a number of cases in the last year or so involving Boeing aircraft, but it is a terrible tragedy, and like I said, I think speculation as well is important to keep to a minimum.
OK, but we're just trying to put together information. Now, Air India has obviously announced that obviously soon after this crash happened, that there had been an incident. They've now set up a dedicated passenger hotline number. I'll read that for those who are watching and listening who may have concerns they've got a family member on board. Although, again, I think it's always important in these situations to establish with someone else here that if that was the actual flight, so that people who definitely have got loved ones on that plane, that they are able to get through. 1-800 5691 444 is the number. That's 1-800 5691 444. That's the number Air India has set up. Now, obviously, there have been big concerns for people back here in Britain with 53 Brits on board. We may indeed, many of the others on board, 169 Indians, 7 Portuguese, 1 Canadian. Obviously, that also includes the 12 crew, but it may well be resident in the UK, given this was a flight to Gatwick. In terms of, I know you want to avoid speculation, in terms of reasons why planes do go down. Now, we're always aware, aren't we, about this extra safety after at takeoff and at landing. Those are the most dangerous times on airlines. Otherwise, air safety is incredibly good, not just in this country, but around the world. What are the specific causes of crashes over time that happen in these sorts of circumstances?
Well, one element could obviously be an incident like a bird strike. Like I said, I don't know if that's the exact cause, but these sorts of unexpected issues can obviously arise. A huge part of airline operations is maintenance on the aircraft. So that will obviously be something that the aviation regulators in India will be bringing up.
Some sort of
Air India.
Mechanical failure.
Yes, perhaps. That is obviously always one possibility. And like I said, I'm sure we'll find out more information on that as we hear investigations and probes going on from the regulators, and I'm sure officials from the government as well.
Yeah. Now, obviously, a lot of people will, be careful about which airline they choose to fly. They'll either go, I want to go somewhere, on the cheap and cheerful, a long trusted national airline. Does Air India have a good reputation for safety internationally?
Well, I can't particularly comment on that because I don't know if how that would compare if you were to rank up all the different airlines in the world and how that would stack up.
Okay. And in terms of what happens now, we know that there's black box sort of investigations that happen after any kind of air incident are very, very important in terms of finding out what happened, and for all airlines and all airline companies, and indeed all passengers and crew, making sure they don't happen again. Tell us what that process is.
Well, of course, like you mentioned, the black box will have information. We'll be finding out information such as the radio communications that were happening between the cockpit and air traffic control. That will obviously give some form of insight into the reasons that the incident happened, and those sad final moments before the plane obviously crashed. And like I said, once the emergency services have carried out all the evacuations of injured people and the area has been made safe, the badly affected infrastructure, the buildings, the official investigation will begin. Like I say, from the regulatory point of view, they'll be involved, and they'll be obviously launching a probe into the cause of the incident, perhaps mitigations, or like I said, if it was an incident like a bird strike, looking at those sorts of causes as well.
OK, William Hallowell, aviation journalist, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Philip Ingram's still with us. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. Obviously, we don't know, and it is only speculation at any one time, but at this time. But I mean, again, things, a bird strike, mechanical failure, of course, a terror strike. I mean, these things are all possibilities that need to be looked at, and they're seeking out that black box. There are 2 black boxes, I think, kept on planes, and to get that information and have an investigation. Concern right now, though, will be trying to save lives. We know that emergency services are on the scene. They're putting out images and putting out flames of local residential buildings that appear to have been hit, and some of the footage showing the plane, fuselage in basically either end of a residential building, so concerned people on the ground. But one of the big issues there will be the fact that the plane was only in the air for less than a minute. Means that it would have had full tanks of petrol, of fuel.
Huge amounts of aviation fuel, 58,000 litres of aviation fuel. And the local Hindustan newspaper, the chief correspondent, is reporting that it hit the BJ Medical College at lunchtime, whenever the boys that are medical students were in the mess hall, and says that there are casualties there. So this only happened a short while ago, and therefore the priority on the ground at the minute is not looking for black boxes. It's trying to save lives and get the fires out, and then the investigation will start once they've secured the area and you've tried to get as many people out as possible. And
indeed, the big concern, of course, is that image of that fireball of the plane crash, because some hoped early on that the plane has had, there are crash landings and crash landings. We've all seen videos, a plane comes down, there's difficulty, even fuselage is breaking, but most people being able to walk out alive. But the explosion is going to be the biggest concern. Although, in fact, one of the most awful things covering these things over many years is actually it's in landings, even if there isn't an explosion, it's actually often the concern about the smoke. That's why you have these oxygen masks as well, but actually the smoke is often the reason why a lot of people lose their lives.
It is, and I've seen satellite photographs of the area that it came down, and it is like large parts of Indian cities. It's
very
hugely built up.
And the plane came down outside the perimeter of the Now, of course, we know that pilots are very well, they're highly trained. These are 2 experienced pilots, 10,000 hours each, that obviously they're trained in circumstances. We saw, of course, that amazing landing of the plane at the Hudson River in New York some years ago, an absolutely heroic event, Hollywood movie level, where, realising, okay, I can't land, I land on these buildings, I'm going to, we're all going to die, and indeed people on the ground, trying to go somewhere that you cause, even if there are deaths, the minimal loss of life. I think we had no loss of life in that case. In this circumstance, if it happens so quickly within seconds, very different circumstances in an entirely built-up area, pilots may not have realised, pilots may not have had any choice.
The pilots may not have any choice. They are trained in different emergencies, and the pilots earn their money taking off and earn the money landing. The plane can fly itself in between most of the time.
That's when you want the experience.
That's when you want the experience. We see some pictures of horrific landings coming in when there's big winds and aircraft almost coming in sideways and everything else. So the pilots will have rehearsed this sort of scenario beforehand, but in many cases there's actually nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, it was very, very concerning. 242 people on board an Air India flight due to land at Gatwick this evening at 6:25 p.m. has crashed outside Ahmedabad airport in Western India. 53 Brits were on board that plane. Passengers included 2 babies as well. We're going to keep you up to date on any developments there. We know the King is being kept informed. A statement from the Prime Minister as well, saying the images are devastating. He's being kept updated on that situation. We'll keep you obviously updated with all the information as we get it. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. We'll keep you up to date on that horrific plane crash in Ahmedabad in Western India. That was an Air India flight that was headed to London Gatwick, due to arrive at 6:25 this evening. 53 Brits among the 242 people on board. Just to give you an update, we understand that a Mayday call was given, signalling there was an emergency within seconds of the plane taking off before the crash. That was the last signal from the plane. The Foreign Office has said that Brits who are concerned about family members can also call the number. I gave you an emergency number in Air India to give it out, but Brits could call the Foreign Office here at on 0207 008 5000. That's 0207 008 5000, said the Foreign Office. Again, I can't reiterate it more strongly. Only if you are 100% know that you have a close family member on board. One family member calls and represents everybody. Please do not inundate, just sort of saying, I think someone I know might be. It's really important that we leave those lines free and open for those who have loved ones who are on board. 11:39 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram is still with me as well. And we're joined right now by Guy Dampier. He's a senior researcher on nationhood at the Prosperity Institute and joins us to talk about what on earth we're going to do about those migrant hotels. And, the prospect of tent cities with the vagrancy no longer to be criminalised from next year. Good morning to you, Guy.
Good morning.
I mean, these things seem like a rather less of a concern than people who've lost loved ones in a plane crash this morning. I'm sure you'll understand, and our hearts go out to those people. But let's talk about these migrant hotels. Last year in the Labour manifesto, they were very clear, we're going to close those migrant hotels. I think the Tories said they were going to do that too. But now they're saying instead of a year, it's going to be in 4 years by 2029. But how are they going to do that, and where are those people going to go?
Well, that is the million or possibly billion-dollar question, which is where, in fact...
Well, right now, the £4.7 billion a year question.
Exactly. So it's a very large sum of money. It's obviously hugely costing the British public to be paying for all this. But the basic problem you've got is that so long as people keep coming, they've got to have somewhere to go. So until the government is able to actually smash the gangs as they claim they were going to, they simply won't be feasible. You can move people out of the hotels, but if you move them out of the hotels, they still need somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And what that means is they'll be moved into local housing, which many people will be equally upset about.
Well, indeed, and this has been the big concern, and we've already seen those huge contracts being signed with Serco and other organisations where they're paying, guaranteeing 5 years' income to a landlord. We'll pay all the electricity and everything, the council tax. We'll pay over the odds, even double in some cases, local market rents. That just completely prices local people out of the market.
It does. I mean, you can't compete with your own government. And a lot of people, I think, will correctly ask why it is that they're simultaneously paying tax to upkeep these people, and then the money they pay in tax is being used to keep them out of the property market.
It is almost laughable, isn't it? But what are the other options? I mean, this thing, even when these people, we found out, that these people were coming across en masse, again, it was Nigel Farage reform. We went out on a boat, went, look at these people arriving every single day, where are they going? And then we found out they're being put in hotels. They ran out of, the 2-star, 3-stars. They were being put in 4, in some cases, 5-star hotels. Most people in this country can't afford those sort of hotels for themselves for an anniversary romantic weekend break, let alone to live in every single day. And then there was the outcry over that. They moved them into sort of lower star hotels. Outcry over that bill is very clear in this, when we see the numbers. So they move them into accommodation. But those bills kind of get hidden away, don't they? We don't see them so easily.
Well, that's part of the intent, is you can dissipate the bills and hide them a little bit. So currently, the Home Office is paying the bills, which means that you can sort of see the single source of everything. But once you move it outside, you can try and split them across. And especially once people are being granted asylum, you can get them into the local system, and you can pass a lot of the costs over to the councils, or you can pass them over to third parties, which may be government funded, but then you have to track the government funding to the third party all the way back.
Yeah. And again, those numbers are going to be hard for people to collate. £4.7 billion being spent on asylum accommodation. Nice, clear number, and people are obviously, if you're not outraged by that, frankly, you're not paying enough attention. But this is the thing: when these people do move into that housing, the accommodation, I mean, one could argue it would be cheaper, would it not? But to a certain extent, when you're signing up these 5-year deals, they're kind of accepting these people are here to stay, aren't they?
Well, I think ultimately they are accepting that they're here to stay. I mean, in most cases, the majority of people that arrive are going to stay. And that may not be just necessarily because they've got a human rights claim. In a lot of cases, it's because it would be against their human rights to return them, whether or not they have a genuine case against themselves. So absolutely, it's going to be a massive problem. They're going to keep going. And as you say, even if you reduce the cost by putting them in houses, that also creates an additional danger because you're putting people who have committed crimes, who have been doing illegal labour. And in some cases, as we've seen in Northern Ireland, there have been claims around sexual assault and other things. You're putting that right next door to somebody. Do people want someone who's unvetted as their neighbour?
And the answer to that is a very clear no, but it's not happening to the politicians making the decisions, the point I've been making for many years. But as you say, you can't even return it. So let's say, you know, I've got, 1,000 a day, whoever arriving. People arrive. We're told they're going to be speeding up the vetting system. That's a good thing. And the Tories let that completely collapse to all intents and purposes. I think the average Home Office official dealing with this was managing, I think, one a week or one a fortnight. I mean, that's laughable. Everyone involved should be sacked on the spot, as far as I'm concerned. But let's say they start dealing with it and processing people. We already have a much higher rate of accepting people as legitimate asylum seekers than France, Germany and others, to the extent that people have actually, gone through all these different countries, haven't been granted asylum, and then they come here as a, country of last resort, and then they get the right to stay. But a lot of it's been the case that the people who haven't been given the right to stay here on asylum grounds, but they're given the right to stay here on indefinite leave grounds. We don't think you're an asylum seeker, but you can stay anyway. And that's more likely to continue to happen, isn't it?
It is. I mean, this is the problem. You can speed up the processing, and that will reduce the amount of time they spend in the hotels. But then at the end of the day, if you're not actually returning them home, if you think that they either have a genuine asylum claim under our incredibly generous rules, or if you think that there's no realistic chance of returning them, then you are still responsible. You still have to put them somewhere. So even if they're going out of the hotels, they're going somewhere, and it's going to be somewhere taxpayer funded.
Because, I mean, presumably at that point, once they're decided they're allowed to work, if you've got no realistic chance of returning them and you accept they're going to be here, do they then have an opportunity to work legally?
So once you've been granted asylum, you can have a right to work. There have been calls to let people who are going through the asylum process have an ability to work. That would slightly reduce the cost, but on the other hand, it also raises difficulties because it'll be used as a hook.
Yeah, and they're working illegally anyway. I mean, if you've had a food delivery lately, that's who's doing it. But what about people who were told, right, you haven't got asylum, but we can't get rid of you, but you're living freely in the community. Can those people legally work?
Well, they probably wouldn't be able to work legally, but there would be ways around that, similar to the delivery apps. There are a lot of ways you can get around. There's a lot of cash in hand stuff, and also, in a lot of those cases, they're not going to have much money. They're going to be going to the council and they're going to be looking for some form of homelessness assistance. It probably won't come through the council. It'll come through a third party, like a housing association, but they'll have some form of assistance.
But we're ultimately, doesn't matter whether it's a hotel, asylum accommodation or local private housing, we're going to foot the bill.
Yeah, literally, no matter what you do, you can make things as good as you want. Until you stop people coming across the channel illegally, you will still have to pay.
And what about the case of this announcement? I thought, frankly, insane announcement from Angela Rayner, the Housing Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. They want to basically abolish the Vagrancy Act of 1824, so more than 200 years. It's been illegal to be a vagrant, to sleep on the streets. It's become the bane of my local area. It's actually a massive issue. Heroin addicts mostly. There are people who beg every day. They turn up. They basically commute to turn up. Very punctual to be there for all the commuters who are going to give them money. But there are those who are rough sleeping and are known to be heroin addicts in the area, causing mayhem in the area. But that's going to be legal in a year's time, according to Angela Rayner, raising the prospect that we're just going to have, as you see in places like Paris now, tent cities popping up everywhere.
Absolutely. The rules currently are incredibly lax. In fact, the biggest issue really with the Vagrancy Act is that it has been so denuded of powers. Yeah. You can't actually move people on. Yeah. And the largely Roma encampment in Park Lane is a great example. That encampment has been cleared at least 3 times, and it just keeps coming back, and they don't really have much ability to get rid of it. Or the amount of time it takes to go through the process is so long, it's worth their while just to pitch there, make some money, and then come back 6 months later.
We have completely lost control, not just of our borders, but of our streets, have we not? Guy Dampier, Senior Researcher at Non-Nationhood at the Prosperity Institute. Really appreciate you joining us. Hope you'll come back on the show. Philip Ingram, your response to all of that?
Yeah, well, I think we should take people out of the asylum hotels by putting them into special facilities for asylum seekers.
Tents? Why don't we just have tent cities, but we put them in the middle of fields somewhere?
Until they're processed, and the majority should be just sent out of the country. Wouldn't it be good if we had somewhere that, as people got off the boats, they're immediately deported to, and then processing happens somewhere else?
Wouldn't that be a good idea? Wouldn't that be a good idea? 11:47 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about what's been going on in Ballymena. Talk to a local DUP politician in that area. Just to get you up to date, though, on the horrific events, that plane crash in Western India. Rescue workers say that at least 30 bodies have been recovered from a building at the site of the plane crash. Rescue workers say more people are trapped inside. Obviously, concerns about the 242 people on board, including 53 British nationals headed to Gatwick. London Airport due to arrive at 6:25 this evening. Big concerns after that. A plane fell out of the sky within seconds of taking off. A huge fireball landed on residential area in residential buildings. Big concerns for the huge loss of life and other casualties. We'll keep you up to date on that. As we get more, we'll bring it to you here first. This is Talk.
Obviously, this is a tragedy beyond measure, but it also goes very trends we are seeing in international aviation for there to be basically very, very few crashes,
yes.
let alone...
People think of it as that so many people are scared to fly, but it is actually, mile for mile, time spent travelling, the safest form of travel. There are so many areas where, safety has been improved over the years, which is why, of course, such horrific stories become news.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
The Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. If you just tuned in, horrific plane crash that happened in the last couple of hours in India. An Air India plane carrying 242 people, passengers and crew, including 53 British nationals, headed for London Gatwick Airport, has crashed within seconds of takeoff into a residential area. Rescue workers say that at least 30 bodies have now been recovered from the building that was crashed into. A huge, big ball of flames and smoke. Really big concerns for everyone, not just on on board that plane, but also those in the residential buildings that were crashed into. Rescue workers are on the scene. They say that more people are trapped inside those buildings. Whether those are people who from the plane or from the buildings, we are not as yet aware. The Prime Minister being kept abreast of events, the Foreign Secretary as well, and indeed the King. A statement from Buckingham Palace has said, we'll keep you up to date as well. As soon as we get more information, we'll bring it to you. Right now, though, let's talk about what has been going on in Ballymena. We've had 3 nights of riots now. We've had local people taking to the streets to concerned about a sexual assault on a 14-year-old girl. 2 14-year-old boys who cannot be named, of course, because of the age, appeared in court, denied charges of the sexual assault, but they needed a Romanian translator in court, clearly not locals. Those riots have spread from, well, a peaceful vigil initially to 3 nights of unrest, including attacks, fireworks thrown, bricks thrown at police, and attacks on a leisure centre where some Romanian families had been taken for their own safety. Well, let's talk about all of this now with Paul Frew. He's a MLA, a member of the Assembly of the DUP for North Antrim, and joins us now. Good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, in terms of this event, I mean, I've just seen the initial reports. It's like these are just racist thugs. They're on the streets. That's what's happening, and that's the reason for these riots. Is that a full explanation of what's going on?
I think damage is done when people generalise the issues here because they are very, very complicated. Let me first of all state that violence is wrong. It needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. It is serving absolutely no strategic purpose. It is drowning out the sympathy and support that thousands of people give to the victims of sexual crime. I've campaigned for many years around violence against women and girls, and you know, we support those families as best we can, but this is drowning out that sympathy and support for those victims, and so the violence must stop.
It doesn't really serve any purpose. I mean, we should all condemn violence, and again, the targeting of people simply because of their nationality, families were absolutely outrageous. I'm sure every right-minded person would agree. But the yobs who are currently on the streets, they are sometimes, some may be representative of local feeling, others most likely not. But there is still, nevertheless, among people who are not taking part in those riots, people who have not committed any criminal acts, massive concern, isn't there, about the scale of immigration, legal and illegal, to the local area. Tell us about the impact of that.
So this has been a concern for many years, and I've been raising it for many years, but I have noticed a rising of tension and fear in my community here in Ballymena for a number of months now and a number of weeks. That has been heightened further. And people have been frightened to walk down their streets, to leave work, to socialise, to meet friends. And it is really worrying and concerning for people and for families. And that goes for everyone here in Ballymena. And I think that has to be articulated, and I think that has to be illustrated, and then something has to be done to assuage that concern and fear.
And this is the concern, isn't it? This is very similar to what happened post-Southport, the horrific attack by Axel Cabana on those little girls at that Taylor Swift-themed summer camp, is that lots of misinformation, lots of just dismissing everybody as just a racist, far-right thug, and that their concerns were not genuine, whereas actually an awful lot of law-abiding people would never dream of picking up a brick or setting fire or intimidating anyone in their local community. They share the same concerns. We understand in particular this sexual assault on a young girl that's been alleged, the 2 boys who've denied involvement, they're accused of attempted oral rape. I mean, as a mum of a teenager, I've got to be honest with you, your heart sinks at this. But this isn't the first alleged sexual assault of a teenage girl in the last few weeks, is it, in the area?
Yeah, and this has basically been a trigger, if you like.
Oh, sorry, Paul, I can't hear you. I think your microphone has dipped or...
Sorry, can you hear me now?
I've got you back, yes.
Sorry about that. So yes, this has been a concern in the local community for a number of weeks now, where we've had a spate of attacks. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been campaigning against violence of women and girls for many, many years, and there's many, many different types of perpetrators.
Yeah,
so
of course.
That has to be said. But there is a massive issue here with regards to concentrated immigration, I believe illegal immigration, and the processes around asylum seeking. And I think that if this is generalised into foreigners versus racist, then we are failing everybody. And also we aren't getting to grips with the problems with concentrated migration, because I know for sure that those immigrants who come in to Northern Ireland are also being exploited. And some of them are being exploited by organised crime from their own countries. And so there's a massive issue with that. There's a massive issue with the process for asylum. There's a massive issue around, obviously asylum seekers can't work, but they're being forced to work by would-be gangmasters who have set up brothels and other unsavoury and illegal establishments. And so these are issues that we're not really grappling with.
And the authorities again and again just sort of just don't, like they did with the grooming gangs across most of the UK. We just don't want to know. It's all a bit too uncomfortable.
And I think they don't realise the scale. And so I think there is they're frightened. Nearly government agencies are frightened to tackle this issue because of how organised it is, and how large the problem is. And we need to get to grips with this. And if we need to shine a light on those practices that hurt communities and also people who move into the area, human beings who want, for one reason or to move into this area, if they're being exploited, we need to know about it, and so do the police. Absolutely. And in terms of just one sentence, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to the top of the hour. Are we expecting there going to be more trouble tonight? I fear that there will be. This will keep going on, and I have to support the police in their actions, trying to protect people and property. So my heart goes out to all the police officers, especially those that have been hurt. And the violence must stop. The violence must stop. Absolutely. Paul Frew, DP MLA for North Antrim, including Ballymena in his constituency. Thank you very much, Dee, for that. Brief word from Philip Ingram.
Paul highlights a real problem there. The gangs that Keir Starmer needs to smash are not just those that are based in the continent, they're those that are exploiting the illegal migrants that are in the country here for their own purposes. We can start smashing them at home quickly. Yeah, absolutely. We know so many. Again, it's the car wash, it's those the barbers, the nail bars, but also sex workers. Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sex workers here. I'm sorry, they are largely trafficked workers now. Again, it is really extraordinary, isn't it? Or we'll see what happens there tonight. Look, we're going to go to the top of the hour. We're going to get the latest headlines. We'll bring you more on what has been happening with the awful crash of that Air India flight involving 53 Brits. We're also going to be talking more about the absolutely useless oil spending review. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Very much appreciate you joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, very much appreciate your company. So much to talk about. Obviously, an awful lot of focus, and we will be in just a few moments on that spending review announced by the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and all the implications of that. Mostly you're on my taxes going up in the autumn. But of course, the British economy contracting by 0.3% at the start of the second quarter of the year. So in April, the month of April, we saw the economy contracting, which is a bit of a worry, because if everything you're planning to do, all the money you're planning to spend is based on growth of 2.5%. I mean, we wish, Rachel Reeves, then basically you are going to have to put more taxes up. Obviously, a lot of focus, though, since we've been on air, has been the crash of that Air India flight very, very, very soon after takeoff in apologies, I've said this wrong so many times. Ahmedabad, it's a city, Gujarat, in West India. It was bound for London Gatwick, due to arrive at 6:25 p.m. tonight. But soon after 10 o'clock, just seconds, within a minute of taking off, that plane was seen to crash in a huge, very, very worrying fireball of just orange fireball, and then huge plumes of dark grey and black smoke. Big concerns, as the plane had, of course, 242 people on board, including 230 passengers. We know now that 53 of those on board were British nationals. We also now know it crashed into a residential area, and we know emergency crews are on the ground. 30 bodies have already been recovered. Others are still in some of the residential buildings where the firefighters are now currently trying to put flames out. But given we know that huge amounts of aviation fuel that would have been on board that plane, having just taken off less than a minute after takeoff on a long flight all the way to London Gatwick, huge concerns whether there'll be any survivors of that plane. As I say, due to land in 6.5 hours in the UK. Obviously, concern being expressed by the Foreign Secretary David Lammy. The Prime Minister Keir Starmer has talked about the devastating images, and we know from Buckingham Palace the King has been kept informed as well. They're yet to have any specific details in terms of casualties, fatalities, but big concerns there about the scale of the devastation of that flight. It has been reported there was a Mayday call signalling an emergency within seconds of takeoff. Some concern about some of the flaps on the planes that were not actually in the right position, and it would be impossible for a plane to actually rise higher, and big concerns about that. But of course, so far speculation on the cause of this plane crash really taking second fiddle to the big concerns about whether or not there are any lives that can be saved. We'll keep you up to date on any developments there. We have Air India have put out an emergency telephone number. We've also had a number from the Foreign Office. If you are very sure that a member of your family, a loved one, is on board that plane, please do not use this telephone number if you just think someone you know. And one member of any family should be in touch, no one else. You can call the Foreign Office on 0207 008 5000. That's the number given out by the Foreign Office. 0207 008 5000 is the number to call. Now, joining me throughout the show today has been Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. Now, you and I are expecting to talk a lot about spending review, a lot about what's been going on at Ballymena, as we've just been discussing those riots, but also, of course, these plans to apparently at some point, maybe one day, get people out of migrant hotels. But there's no doubt at all, I mean, focus is really today on this plane crash, is it not?
It is, and the ongoing rescue operation at the moment. There's a lot of speculation starting to come out about what's caused it. The local authorities won't be interested in that at the moment. They're trying to identify the number of casualties. They're trying to see if there's any survivors, not just from within the aircraft, but the buildings that were hit as well. And that will be the priority, getting them into hospital and securing the area before they then start to work out why this tragic incident
searching for black boxes and the like, and helping to prevent in the future. Well, I say we'll keep you up to date on any developments, and our reporter Nick Ellaby will be live from Gatwick Airport, where that plane was due to land. He's getting more information for us, and he'll be going live in just a few moments. First up, though, let's return to the issue of the spending review and Rachel Reeves' performance. 45 minutes of it yesterday, where she announced huge sums of money that are going more in public spending, some in investment infrastructure that many of us would very much welcome. But what she didn't do, what she wasn't expected to do, but one has no idea how she's going to do, is announce how she's going to pay for it all. Speculation from not just opposition parties, but the Institute of Fiscal Studies and pretty much every other think tank and a financial body, that she's going to have to raise taxes in the autumn. Well, let's talk about all of this now with John Lord Moynihan. He's a Conservative peer and author of the brilliant book on, well, the economy and how we could return to growth, called Return to Growth. A very good afternoon to you.
Lovely to be here,
Thank you so much
Julia.
for joining us. I suppose just your first thoughts, your initial thoughts, when I don't know if you managed to watch or listen to Rachel Reeves. We got Peter Carbell to watch it here, so we could just do the highlights. We didn't actually have to listen to her. I'm genuinely impossible. I find it impossible to listen to her or Keir Starmer without just sort of hanging my head. But what was your reaction to what she announced yesterday?
Well, very quickly, first, enormous sympathy to those families.
Obviously, yes.
And anybody in doubt, because it must be terrible, wondering what on earth's happening. But having said that, I tried to watch her, and it's mostly blather. It's sort of, people are in need, and that's why I am announcing, and so forth. And it's terribly difficult to actually untangle what it all adds up to, and very few people have actually added it all up.
Yeah. And we haven't got the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, giving their take, because it's a spending review, not a budget. Or an
Correct. And of course the OBR have been proved wrong over and over again. Last year, at the last analysis they did, they said GDP growth would be 2% as a result of this.
Sorry,
I know. And then they cut that to 1%, and now they're going to have to cut it again.
And it's fallen by 0.3% in April
just today, which we all knew was going to happen because the NIC came in and so many things. But in fact, what we really need is commentators who talk about 7 different things. They talk about spending, tax, the deficit, immigration, employment, GDP growth, inflation. 7 different things are all affected by what she has done. Now, first of all, as you're saying, she's spending a lot more. And I wish people would stop talking about expenditure versus investment. It's all money out. When you do your household finances, you look at how much you've got in the bank and you say, how much can I afford to spend?
Yeah, but you might say, but putting in a new kitchen, that will improve the value of your home, and therefore that's an investment. I mean, I know it's still money that comes out of the same account.
Have you got the money?
Yeah.
Where are you going to get the money? So we need to know how much she's spending. Now, this thing, then people say, everybody's saying, well, they're spending a lot more money than they said they would, so they're going to have to raise taxes. But there's a difference between the tax rate and the tax take.
Yeah.
You, Julia, when they raise taxes, will have to pay more money. I can guarantee you that, and so will I. But that doesn't mean to say that the overall amount of money they raise from these increased taxes will increase. In fact, they'll probably go down. And this is
why do you say that? This is the Laffer curve.
Well, it's what I incredibly egocentrically call the Moyni curve, which is a further iteration of the Laffer curve. It actually
explain it in simple terms for us, please.
I've written about this since 2016. Every year, they announce more taxes, and they say, therefore, we're going to get more money coming in because we've raised tax rates. And I wrote in 2016, and I wrote every year since, the British people won't pay more than about 36% of GDP in taxes. You won't get more than that out of them. So what is happening now that they're increasing taxes on steroids, is there's a flood of people out of the country.
Yeah.
And it's what
1 millionaire every 45 minutes.
Exactly. So it's what the lefties call millionaires and billionaires, but it's not actually. It's high-end hairdressers. It's high strivers, 25 years old in the city. They're all going off to Dubai, to Monte Carlo, to New York, to Australia.
But they won't all go.
Look, Dubai is now somewhere between the 7th and the 11th largest British city.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, they are going, and it doesn't matter about all going. It's the top 1% who pay 30% of all taxes who are all flooding out.
And people say, they won't leave, but we know they do. We know they do. Okay, but here's the thing. When we're told, everyone is saying taxes are going to have to go up, you're saying that actually for an awful lot of ordinary people, people on normal average wages, just driving every day, that their taxes are or aren't likely to go up?
53% of Brits get more from the state than they give in taxes.
So they're not paying very much in tax, and they're getting working tax credit, bit universal credit, bit
that's half. I'm assuming that you're paid an unconscionably large sum of money because you're so fantastic.
I do this for free.
You're so fantastic at what you do, and so therefore you will be hit, and you won't want to leave. I won't want to leave.
Better off people should pay more tax than people who are struggling, shouldn't they?
Well, they do. That's what I said. The top 1% of taxpayers pay 30% of all income tax.
So when people say, I mean, this is very much, a Jeremy Corbyn, tax the rich. I mean, everyone says people won't vote for higher taxes, but they did in 2017, when Jeremy Corbyn really almost got in 2017.
Correct.
Because it was other people over there.
Exactly.
But the reality is not only do those people leave when they can, the concern is also they are the people who provide the jobs which enable other people to pay tax.
Correct. And for 10 years, every year, I've said it won't go up above 36%. They're forecasting, the OBR forecasting, 38% of GDP will be the tax take. They forecast that with Sunak and Hunt. This is an ecumenical criticism. The Conservatives were just as bad as Labour. They all forecast we'll be able to get more money in taxes by increasing tax rates, and it never happens.
But fundamentally, Rachel Reeves has said, look, we're not going to borrow anymore, and we were spending already over £100 billion a year just servicing, just paying the interest on our debt. We're not paying off the mortgage, we're just on an interest-only one, guys. We've still got that debt. But she's also said, she wouldn't raise things like, she said, income tax, VAT, national insurance on working people. They then basically pretended that didn't include national insurance for employers, which was a simple lie. It's a breach. However, if they're not going to raise, I don't think politically they can get away with raising VAT apart from on private school fees, obviously putting that in place, or national insurance or income tax. In which case, what are they going to do? Because they're going to be getting it from people on average incomes, because there are more of them than there are of the rich people, and people on average incomes can't afford to move to Monte Carlo.
Correct. Well, they can afford to move to Dubai. Lots of good, hard-striving people are. But you have to add up the math when they say they're not going to borrow more. They're saying that they're spending 45% of GDP on their various programmes, partly because they're paying so much money to the public sector trade unions. In fact, when you throw in the investment, it's more like 47%. If you think that they'll only get 36% of GDP in tax, and they get about 4% more in rents and things like that of government property, so they'll be up to 40. That's a deficit of 7% of GDP, which is horrendous.
Give us, what sort of numbers? Because, again, most people don't even understand percentages.
Absolutely.
What sort of what actual numbers are we talking?
GDP is about £2.6 trillion right now. Yeah. So half of that is £1.3 billion. 47% is just a bit less than that. And a 7% deficit is a couple of hundred billion. I'm not going to help you here. Couple of $100 billion.
Let me just get that from the back of the sofa. Couple of £100 billion more that we're spending than we've got coming in tax.
They're saying a lot of people are saying it's a £300 billion expenditure package when you include investment in this latest.
That's not sustainable. I'm going out on a limb here.
No, the IMF is going to come calling. It was what they did.
Wait a minute, but aren't all the other countries in Western Europe doing it as well? We've had Elon Musk in America saying that they're multi-trillion dollar debt.
We're worse. Our GDP is worse. Don't forget that the big thing that's dropping in GDP is manufacturing. Why is manufacturing dropping? It's because we have the highest electricity prices in the developed world. And so all the manufacturers are closing down, going offshore. Also, we've increased NIC, so it's much more expensive to hire somebody. So you're just getting less and less and less.
Every single fact. But this is the thing, isn't it? When the government talks about we're going to predicate everything based on growth, and again, I'm in favour of some of the infrastructure spending. I want reservoirs built. I want nuclear power stations built. I want infrastructure in the Midlands and the North. Exactly. You need the money to pay for it. Now, you might borrow in advance because that's going to improve our economy overall and give us secure energy. So you borrow to pay for it, but you need to have a plan in the future. We're not going to be getting 2.5% growth. No one is thinking that's going to happen. In fact, our best chance of getting it is if we go to war, because War is great for growth, isn't it? It's great for an economy because you go onto a war footing and then you start manufacturing. But given the uncertainties over Donald Trump's whims on any given morning in terms of trade tariffs, given where we are with Vladimir Putin, we've had warnings from, the German spy agency chief that he thinks that Vladimir Putin's going to test a NATO country next after Ukraine. People predictions of us, a war, between China invading, seizing Taiwan or controlling the waters around Taiwan within a couple of years. If you think Ukraine had an economic impact, think again, hold my beer, says China.
Yes.
We have so much coming down the line, which would, each individual thing would throw, not a spanner, I mean, I've thrown, goodness me, multi-billion, multi-trillion pound spanner in the works. What hope does Rachel Reeves have of ever getting on top of this?
Correct. And you made the important point about defence. This set of announcements makes it more likely that Donald Trump will walk away. Why? Because they will walk away from NATO, will walk away from supporting us, because she says we're increasing defence expenditure. How did she do that? We're spending this much, and then over here we're spending this on intelligence, on the Foreign Office and so forth, and she's just taken those numbers and put them into the defence spend and said, look, we're spending more on defence. We're actually not spending a lot more. And of course, what's more, the things we're already spending on defence, like DEI and making sure that we've got a happy clappy...
Chagos surrender.
The Chagos surrender and so forth. We're not
And it's not what we spend, it's what we can actually do with what we spend money on.
It's the armaments.
OK.
Yes.
How have we got ourselves into this mess? Because look, a lot of people will say, I mean, the Tories would argue, look, we were left with having to deal with austerity after the banking crash, deregulation of banking. That was what caused the problem, the housing crisis, housing collapse in America. The Labour Party would say, no, it's all down your lockdown policies. Of course, they would have supported more and longer lockdowns, so they're not off the hook there. Then it's the Ukraine war, and everyone's always blaming, but of course, again, that spike in energy prices largely down to long-standing policies of us not having a secure energy in this country already ourselves. And again, the bailout of people's energy bills, Labour was calling for it as well. They're all just as bad as each other, I think most of my audience would say, and I would say. But how have we got into a mess where we just go, we're just going to keep spending and spending and spending and raising taxes and raising taxes? And there might be a little correction here and there by a tiny amount. Because is any of that sustainable long term? I
don't think it's much to do with the 2007 crash. What happened was, back in the year 2000, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were spending about 1/3 of the economy on government expenditure.
That's when we were booming.
Now it's almost half. Back in 2000, under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, they were raising tax at a lower number than that, and thus creating a surplus every year. For 3 years, this country was in surplus and paying its debt down.
We still had some leftover North Sea oil money. There were other things going on that meant things were going well.
But basically, we had a smaller government and lower taxes, and then Gordon Brown went tonto and started spending, and then they were talking of austerity in 2010. That wasn't austerity. We were actually growing our expenditure every year. And ever since, we've been spending more and more and more. And unfortunately, I think I know I'm well off now, so, people can yell at me for talking from the comfortable position of being well off. But for most people in this country now, and for the commentariat, the emphasis is on rights, not responsibilities. And it's my right for the government spend this money on me on this, and this. Nothing about it's my responsibility to stand on my own, to look after my family, to live within my means, and to not look to the state to provide everything. Yeah. Because when you do that latter, then you get an economy that doesn't grow. And we're now the 27th richest in terms of GDP per capita around the developed nations, out of 45 nations.
And it's per capita that matters. We've been told for years, mass immigration is great, it was great for the economy. No, and again, that's simply not the case in terms of the majority. But also, low-skilled, low-wage work. But also, once you added an extra number of people, you had 10 million more people, but you don't build any more houses, don't build any more infrastructure,
so
you have that
cost. Half of social housing is now occupied by foreign-born...
in London. Yeah. What is the answer? Because, and I say this I think we get the politicians we deserve, because voters say, Oh, I don't want my taxes to go up. You can put taxes up on John. That's fine. I don't want my taxes to go up. Oh, but you need to pay the nurses more. Oh, but I want more for the schools. I like my kids' teacher. Oh, but I want that new power station. Oh, but I want you to build some more rail links. More police, please. More prisons, please. Yeah. Everybody wants more, but everyone says, I don't want my taxes to go up. Aren't we responsible as a whole, the British population, for this mess? Because politicians do it. They lie to us, but I think we force them to lie to us, because if they said, we're going to have to put your taxes up to pay for this, or we're not going to have it, I don't think they get voted in.
Huey Long said it almost a century ago. He said, don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax the fella behind the tree. And it's always been the same. And so you've got to have politicians, and I don't think there are any right now, who say there is no money. You have responsibilities. We can't fulfill everything you think of as a right.
When you look at someone like Milei in Argentina...
Correct.
Is he doing the right thing? I mean, he has massive public support. He gets applauded in and out of restaurants.
Yes,
but he has huge cuts.
But do we have to fall to the appalling lows that Argentina has fallen to before a Milei appears? That's called having a Milei moment, and we're a little ways off from that, but I think we'll be there by the end of this Parliament.
You think we are going to be in those sort of straits?
Yeah, and
do you think people are waking up to it? Do you think, well, also, actually, when they do put taxes up in the autumn, but they try and put them on, on business corporations, and people stop employing people, and people leave, and our tax takes goes down, and then we get into more and more and more mess, and the debt goes up. Yeah. And our debt, every time that happens, our debt costs will go up, will they not? Our debt costs are higher than Italy's by a long way already, which says something, because we're a better economy than theirs. We should be having lower costs. We are considered now a bad bet. If that all happens, do you think there will be a wake-up call?
I don't know. I don't know what kind of people live in this country anymore, but I hope so. But partly it's the media. There's so few people like you who are prepared to call it like it is, and who talk about investment, and who talk about, everybody should pay more. Oh, these millionaires and billionaires, they should pay more. It's fantasy economics. All of which is revealed in my book.
Yes, I have to mention. Return to Growth. We talked about it on the show before. Return to Growth. Lord Moynihan, John Moynihan, really, really interesting to hear your thoughts about this. Listening to all of that, Philip Ingram with great interest. What do you want to say?
Yeah, well, fascinating. Across all departments, and I see this, and I've seen this in the Ministry of Defence. One of the issues is a lack of accountability for those that are decision makers. They don't see the money as their money, and therefore there's a lack of responsibility. Correct. And people will get promoted out of positions where they make complete and utter mess ups of major programmes, and a lot of those
the bigger your budget, the better it is for your career.
And until we bring in two things: one, accountability for those that are paid huge sums of taxpayers' money in their salaries and their final salary pensions, they should be held to account. And the second thing is, get rid of politics by soundbite, please. Put substance behind it.
We need to start doing some 24-year planning rather than 24-hour politicking. Thank you very much, Philip. And huge thanks to Lord Moynihan, Conservative peer, author of Return to Growth, coming in. I imagine an awful lot of you were cheering on every single word there. Nevertheless, your taxes will go up in the autumn, just so you're wondering. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be hearing from a talk reporter, Nick Ellaby. He's going to be live for us from Gatwick Airport, obviously reporting on that horrific crash in India, an Air India plane carrying 242 passengers and crew, aiming for Gatwick Airport, due to land in about 6 hours' time at Gatwick Airport, but sadly has crashed just outside the airport at Ahmedabad in Western India. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk. An Air India jet that was reported to have been heading to Gatwick Airport in London, so highly likely that there would have been Brits on board. The plane's final signal was received just seconds after takeoff. The aircraft was lost at 10:08 a.m. local time, less than a minute after takeoff. It had reached 625 feet, and it fell just outside the airport. It had just taken off from Ahmedabad's airport perimeter. The aviation minister for India has said they are on the highest alert, and rescue teams have been mobilised.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:28 is the time. Let's go live right now to Gatwick Airport, where our Talk reporter Nick Ellaby is on the scene. And obviously, Nick, this is where in, just about 6 hours' time, this Air India flight was AUI 171 was due to land with some 242 passengers and crew on board from India. But sadly, we've seen that crash just within a minute of takeoff in Western India. Can you tell us the latest that we know about what has actually happened?
Yeah, good afternoon, Julia. That's right. As you say, that Air India flight was supposed to arrive here at Gatwick at 6:25 this evening. What we do know is that it came down around 9:08 UK time this morning. Flight radar information showed it didn't get more than 650 feet off the ground. We understand there was a mayday signal just before the crash. It came down in a residential area called Megani Nagar, just outside Ahmedabad Airport. Unconfirmed reports that it's hit a doctor's hostel there. Teams on the ground say they've recovered some 30 bodies, and they're working on getting people out of the rubble. As you mentioned, 242 passengers and crew members on that Air India 171 flight leaving at Ahmedabad this morning. We understand 53 British nationals were among that 242. 169 Indian nationals, and also one Canadian and one Portuguese national. The plane itself was a Boeing 787, a Dreamliner. We understand it was around 11 years old. We know the pilot had some 8,000 hours of experience. There was lots of unconfirmed video and photos coming out of that crash, but pictures, shocking pictures and video of a ball of flames as it came down. UK Foreign Office teams are working both here in the UK and in India with the authorities there. Crisis teams have been set up. Here at Gatwick, they've also set up a sort of crisis family centre. People here have told me they're already starting to get calls and visits from people who believe that their loved ones and family and friends were on that flight. So, you know, that's quite a tense situation, really. And in terms of the authorities here, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been kept informed. He says his thoughts and prayers are with all the passengers and their families at this deeply distressing time. Called the whole incident devastating. And Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the whole thing is heartbreaking beyond words. It's the biggest crash that's ever happened in Ahmedabad. And as I say, crisis teams from the UK Foreign Office working here and in India, and also here at Gatwick, crisis teams set up for a family centre for anyone wanting to come here and find out more information about their loved ones and family, Julia. Thoughts and prayers are with them.
Absolutely. Now, we know, of course, this is a plane that had just taken off for a long flight all the way to the UK, and therefore huge amounts of aviation fuel on board, and that will, of course, cause even more issues when the plane hit the ground in terms of the explosion. And you mentioned this ball of flames, video emerging within minutes of this plane seen in the air, disappearing below trees, and then this huge ball of flames, and then thick plumes of dark black and grey smoke. Big concern also that the plane crashed into residential buildings in a very, very densely populated area of this city, just outside the airport perimeter.
Yeah, as we understand that they lost signal with the plane about a minute after it took off, and we understand less than 5 minutes after takeoff it came down. As you mentioned, yeah, a very residential area called Megani Nagar, just outside the compound area of Ahmedabad Airport. There are pictures of the tail cone of the airport sticking out of a building. The authorities on the ground in India say they've recovered some 30 bodies from the rubble. As I say, they're working on pulling people out of that rubble as we speak. But yeah, I mean, shocking incident, and as I say, thoughts are with everyone.
Indeed.
concerned.
Well, we've got video footage, obviously, of rescue workers trying to, put flames and smoke, get to quell the smoke on residential buildings that appear to have been set alight. And you mentioned footage of some of the fuselage actually poking out of this building. Big concern. We understand a medical college was struck. This was around lunchtime in local time when this airliner struck. So big concerns, people on the ground as well as in the air. We know that the Air India have put out an emergency hotline. Foreign office have issued a number, but again, I think we need to reiterate how important it is that people, only one family member gets in touch, and for people to, to try and ascertain information on the ground first. But of course, at this moment in time, we do not know the level of casualties. We don't know if there are any survivors from the plane, hopefully at least from on the ground. But this is going to be a long and very deep investigation. Obviously, they've got to get hold of these black boxes if they're still in existence. But certainly some of the footage that we're showing right now in terms of devastation to local buildings really doesn't give us cause for much hope for anyone who was on board the plane at the time.
Absolutely. I mean, very difficult to survive something like this. You mentioned the black boxes there. I mean, the investigators will be getting as much information as they can from those flight paths, from the radars. There should be 2 black boxes on board, which they will try and recover. But as I say, at the moment, no indication as to what caused this.
Yeah.
But very, very difficult for anyone to survive such a horrific incident.
Indeed. Luke Ellaby, thank you very much indeed. Talk reporter there live from Gatwick Airport. They're already setting up a unit there for family members who would be otherwise been planning to travel to Gatwick to meet their family, their loved ones. Many perhaps might have already set off to be there. Long journeys from other parts of the country. 53 British nationals on board of those 242 passengers and crew. We understand 2 infants among those on board. Philip Ingram still with me. You're a former senior military intelligence officer. Obviously, there'll be speculation about the likely cause. A bird strike, mechanical failure. There's some images, some discussion from airline experts, pilots online about you can see the actual image of the plane. I mean, everyone has a mobile phone now, and the flaps on the wings were not at the right angle. That would have made it impossible for the plane to continue to. It was mounting, going up, and then it just suddenly started going down. Yeah. Rather than an explosion in the air. Would that make it certainly less likely, and it is only speculation at this current time, I must stress that it was, for instance, a terror attack?
There's nothing to indicate it's a terror attack. I've seen the photographs of the aircraft going down. There's no indication of anything internal or external interfering with the aircraft in an explosive way. At the moment, the air accident investigators will probably start hoovering up as much of this video as they possibly can. That's going online. They'll be waiting and allowing the rescue workers to carry out the job that they're doing on the ground to secure the area, try and preserve the scene, but get as many look for survivors, get as many survivors to hospital.
That's the number one issue.
And then the second issue will be to start to identify, record the bodies out of there and remove those safely, and then get access to the black boxes.
And the black boxes, again, they're not black. They're bright orange.
They're bright orange.
And they are made of some substance that they will survive.
They're designed to survive these sorts of crashes.
And the importance of these is it's not about just like, let's have an investigation. This is not about bureaucracy. This is about saving lives in the future. If something has happened that could have been prevented, airlines, industry want to know so they can prevent loss of life in the future.
Exactly. They record 2 things. They record all of the data that's going around the aircraft from an electronic perspective.
Everything
and these are very modern aircraft, so everything is happening in there. And then the second one is the cockpit voice recorder, because you pick up so much from what the crew are saying, because they will identify from the electronic warnings that are going off, if there are any, and it's their actions then, and they'll analyse those actions. And of course, we've got reports that there was a Mayday call went out, which is the last we heard of the aircraft.
Okay. Well, like I say, we'll keep you up to date all day on all the developments there on that Air India flight AI-171, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner that has crashed just soon after takeoff in Western India, headed for London Gatwick, due to arrive just under 6 hours time. Of course, we spoke to our reporter there at Gatwick Airport. He'll be there for us for the rest of the day. We'll keep you updated. Let's take a quick break right now. Up next, we're going to be talking about Vladimir Putin's threat not just to Ukraine, but his threat to other, NATO members like ourselves, testing whether or not we are actually going to stick by our NATO alliance, but also the threat possibly of, who knows what's going to happen, Israel and Iran. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Right, let's talk to Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, OBE. He's a former British Army colonel and joins us to talk about where we are in terms of our defence spending, big part of the announcement of the spending review by Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, yesterday. A very good afternoon to you, Hamish.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Well, Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, obviously very much the man who's supportive, and probably the most supportive of Ukraine, certainly among European leaders with the initial invasion there by Vladimir Putin. He has said that the defence budget will leave it at Russia's mercy and is feeble. This after an announcement it's going to be going from 2.3% to 2.6% of GDP. But that kind of hides the fact that the Chagos surrender deal is included in there and that it's going to be frozen at 2.6%. The NATO chief is saying Trump wants it and he believes it should be up to 5%. So this is too little too late. What do you say?
Well, I tend to agree with Boris, actually, especially also we learnt yesterday that the security services are included now in the defence budget, which is, that's crazy. And I think, the Strategic Defence Review, which we saw last week, which I thought was a pretty good review. I thought it was very comprehensive and said the capabilities we needed, but you can't buy that at 2.6%. So I think it's pretty disappointing. And at the moment, there is so much brinkmanship going on, not only here in Europe, but of course in the Middle East as well. And, we need to be showing a really strong deterrence to Putin, because I think, also on the wires over the last 24 hours, the head of the German intelligence service has said that Putin doesn't really think that, NATO is going to dig in and support Ukraine and fight. And when he sees things like the defence review yesterday with a tiny amount of extra cash, which really isn't going to shift the dial, you can understand why Putin thinks that he's on the...
Bearing in mind, Putin didn't think that we'd come to the aid of Ukraine to the extent that we did. And amazing how many people here say, well, we called this bluff. No, we got it the wrong way round. He should have absolutely thought we'd come to the aid. I've been concerned for a number of years that we wouldn't come to the aid of a NATO ally. Oh, yeah, maybe France. But the Baltic states, Finland, would we? Finland have only just joined NATO. But the reality is, again, it wouldn't be tanks rolling over the borders. That's not actually what they normally do. It's not what they did in Crimea, the little green men and all that. But it is interesting, the German spy chief is basically saying, look, he's going to test our resolve. And many of us worry that we will be found wanting.
Well, absolutely. And I think, the Finns don't need our soldiers. The Finns have got, a million of their own they can put in to the deck.
We'll be needing theirs.
But we entirely. But we need to demonstrate resolve, and there is a British battle group in Estonia. That's a good thing. But we just can't rely on providing advice and command and control. We need to put sort of military hardware down there as well, because again, this is what Putin respects, and for some reason, Putin sees absolutely the UK as the main protagonist here. Whether we are or not is irrelevant. Putin has got it in for us. So whatever we do is going to impact him far more than anybody else, which is why we need to show resolve. And as you say, he shouldn't be having these questions. There should have been absolutely no doubt that we wouldn't pile in to help Ukraine. There should be absolutely no doubt that we won't pile in with the rest of
But
Europe.
of course, we don't have. We don't have a NATO Article 5, commitment to Ukraine. But we did actually sign a deal with the US, Russia, and us to guarantee the borders of Ukraine. So I believe we did have a duty of care, which we should stick by. In terms of the threats we have got, there's a lot of talk about Russia moving its planes to a remote base far away from Ukraine as possible over those drone attacks. They are clearly worried, but we've also got concerns that this summer we will see a drive forward from Russian forces ahead of any possible maybe attempts in the future to come to some sort of peace deal and keep as much territory as possible. Is that a concern for you?
Well, absolutely. I think, first of all, Putin has no interest in peace at all at the moment. And we should really note that, whatever we're doing. The movement of his expensive bombers away is a really good thing. And I think it demonstrates in Operation Spider's Web that Ukraine can do the business. If we give them the wherewithal, they will carry out and do it.
And they've always said that. Zelensky's always said, we don't need you to spill blood, we can help. Can I ask you also about what's going on in the Middle East? I know you keep abreast of many things, and you've been very much involved in helping, years ago, getting injured children out of Syria. I know you keep up on these things. US media claim that sources tell them that Israel is now seriously considering taking military action against Iran in the coming days. US president has basically pulled out a lot of diplomatic staff from embassies around the Middle East, Iraq and elsewhere, saying it's no longer safe, considering that basically this is about preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons that they could actually pose a threat to, well, not just Israel, indeed the entire Middle East and the world. How concerned are you about that?
Well, I think, first of all, we know that the Israelis have prepared the battlefield, as we call it. Last year they took out the air defence sites and air defence capability that would protect these nuclear sites. So we absolutely know they can do it. And let us hope that this is part of Trump's brinkmanship. The great Sun Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said that the best way to win a war is not to fight. If Trump can persuade the Iranians to stop developing nuclear weapons without the Israelis having to go and bomb them, then all the better. I think the final thing I'd say on this, Julia, is that the Israelis and others have absolutely destroyed all the Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas. So Iran is a much weakened place. And I think this is the time to turn the screw on them, to make sure that we've got all the other threats, Russia in particular, that we need to worry about. Let's hope we don't have to concern ourselves with Iran.
Absolutely. Hey, Mr. Brenton Gordon, OBE, so appreciate you joining us. Former British Army Colonel. Let me bring in Philip Ingram, MBE. I'm the only one without a title here. Former Senior Military Intelligence Officer. I don't know what I've been doing wrong with my time. How concerned are you about... well, again, I think I'm asking the wrong question about Israel bombing Iranian nuclear weapon targets, because I'm very much in favour of them doing that. There's quite one thing having Putin having nuclear weapons. It's quite another thing the mad mullahs of Iran having nuclear weapons.
I'm very concerned, and I agree completely with everything my good friend Hamish has said. What makes me concerned about Iran is Donald Trump, talking to Putin, asked Putin to make sure that he didn't give Iran a weapon that could destroy Israel. Israel hasn't declared it, but we know pretty well that it's got nuclear weapons. Iran, in the last few days, has put imagery out as part of its information operation showing it firing a ballistic rocket that it said was there for its strategic for its nuclear forces, with a conventional topping to it that just simulated the weight of a nuclear warhead. And then Iran has also said that they've enriched sufficient uranium to make a number of nuclear warheads. I know they haven't got it at the moment because as soon as Iran gets a nuclear warhead, Tehran will disappear under a mushroom cloud. I firmly believe, and this is a personal opinion, that Israel will carry out a first nuclear strike against Iran if they think they've got the weapons.
Without publicly admitting, they have done it before.
Well, they haven't dropped a nuclear weapon.
But they don't need to drop a nuclear. Why would they need to drop a nuclear weapon on?
Because they would be so scared if they thought that Iran had a viable nuclear warhead that could be fired in minutes.
Previously, they've just nudge, wink, wink. Everyone pretending it's not there. They've just taken out
attacked from a conventional perspective. Okay. They'll do that first of all. But if they thought they had a nuclear weapon that was viable, they would nuke Iran.
It's just not a happy news day, guys. 12:47 this time. Just some very worrying news. I think to be expected, though, coming out of India, according to local police in Ahmedabad, more than 100 bodies have now been brought into the hospital, into the morgues. There was 30 reported earlier, more than 100 bodies. And these are not patients, these are bodies recovered from the crash scene. The big concerns, 242 people on board, 53 Britons, of course, but also local residents, local residential buildings, massive big cloud of fire and smoke, big concerns over those on the ground as well. Up next, we're going to be talking to an aviation analyst about what could possibly be in the cause and how the air investigation will go. But of course, many people still worried. That flight was due to land at Gatwick Airport later this early evening, and of course is on the ground in a fireball in India, and obviously big concern for many families and friends of those loved ones. 53 Brits known to be on board that flight heading to Gatwick. That's coming up in a few moments. This is Talk.
Obviously, this is a tragedy beyond measure, but it also goes very trends we are seeing in international aviation for there to be basically very, very few crashes, let alone...
People think of it as that so many people are scared to fly, but it is actually, mile for mile, time spent travelling, the safest form of travel. There are so many areas where safety has been improved over the years, which is why, of course, such horrific stories become news.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and of course all the conversation about the spending review and migrant camps and rough sleepers and goodness me, very much superseded by the horrific news that happened just after 10 o'clock this morning after the downing of an aircraft, an Air India flight due to arrive at London Gatwick Airport carrying 242 passengers and crew, include 2 children, 53 Brits on board that plane. The latest news we break to you just in the last couple of moments, 100 bodies having been taken to hospital, bodies not walking wounded, but bodies taken to local hospitals in the local area where we've seen this plane crash, Ahmedabad Airport. Now, let's talk to Alex Macheras. He's an aviation consultant and analyst and joins us to talk about this. Good afternoon to you, Alex.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, look, for a lot of people, it'll be maybe too early for speculation about what the precise cause of this may be, but in terms of what could cause a plane to, basically not fall out of the sky, because judging from the video footage we've seen, there's a huge amount, a plane taking off and within a minute, a mayday call, we understand, being made, and then falling out of the sky. Some concerns about mechanical failure, other issues. Without knowing the details of this plane crash, what are the likely or most possible explanations for this horrific crash?
No, Julia, thankfully, something like this is so rare, right? Because we categorically have the safest form of transport. You're safer flying than you are in an elevator.
Yeah.
So something like this happens involving a latest generation aircraft with over 240 on board, because it was a long-haul aircraft operating what should have been a routine long-haul flight. It's going to shake everyone, not just the industry, but the impact will be felt far and wide. The footage, of course, is equally disturbing, because the footage shows this 787 Dreamliner struggling to gain altitude. And immediately, and I've spoken already to some execs at other airlines to get their reaction to this and different safety teams, the priority is going to be finding out why. Why was this 787 just moments after takeoff struggling to gain altitude and then seemingly stalling? And let me just break down really simply what stalling means in air travel and with aircraft, because it's much different to when you stall a car. But stalling is almost as if you were in a car and trying to accelerate up a hill without pushing your foot on the gas. That's almost what stalling is like with an aircraft.
But of course, for a car on the road, you just stop. But that's
right.
That's not what happens for an airliner. Can I just bring in just some breaking news? The local city police commissioner has said there appears to be no survivors from the Air India airliner that crashed. Obviously, trying to rescue people who were in the apartment blocks and residential buildings in this very built-up area outside the perimeter of the airport. But in terms of the airliner itself, that huge explosion, that ball of flames that we saw on the video that we've been showing, that you would have seen, big concern that anyone would have survived. But I suppose just reaction to that I don't think that's sadly going to come as a surprise after seeing those awful scenes.
Unfortunately not. I think when the initial kind of takeaway after in those very early moments was, my initial thought was, this is probably going to be one of the most significant air travel aviation disasters, not just for Indian model commercial aviation history, but globally. And to have an aircraft with 10 hours worth of fuel for what should have been a routine flight to London, there are so many things that were going to worsen the likelihood as to whether or not there were going to be survivors from the aircraft, with a whole different set of priorities for the investigators and the rescue teams trying to get survivors for those on the ground too.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to what you were saying in terms of the technicalities. So an aeroplane stalls, they can't gain height. There's some footage of the flaps being at the wrong angle, I think, on the wings of the plane that people are commenting on. What happens then?
Well, again, there's very little that we do know, and we are just going by that footage. But as I say, it does look consistent with a stall. Now, why? Why do aircraft stall? It can be a number of reasons. And what I would caution is that it is typically so many different contributors that come together to form that final outcome, rather than just one thing. Before we say, it's probably the flight crew, or maybe it was the aircraft. It's usually a cocktail, a kind of a mixture of contributors that happen over a period of time that lead to that tragic eventuality. The part that I will specifically laser in on, though, is the aircraft. This is an aircraft that, until this morning has never been involved in a fatal accident, has never had a fatality associated with it. And that's not by coincidence. The aircraft has been with Air India for over 10 years. It is the latest gen from Boeing. Boeing, understandably so, will be doing whatever they can over the next few days to try to rule out the role that the aircraft may have played, but it's complex stuff, and it's going to take time.
And again, as you say, it could be complex, mechanical failure. There have been one of the things that cannot bring an aircraft down is a bird strike, or of course we have had incidents where we had pilot error or indeed pilot suicide. That has been the case in the past. So they'll be looking at every possible option, presumably.
Everything. And as we switch from search and rescue to recovery, that focuses less on trying to look for human lives and more on recovery of key components. They'll be looking for the black box, which will be able to tell them what the aircraft was actually doing in those final moments. Typically, Julia, the black box gives us quick answers and perhaps the greatest idea of all within those first few days or weeks. So Boeing are dispatching a team from the US to assist with all of this. And the quest for answers happens really, really quickly.
And it's really important because it's about the whole airline industry. It's not just Boeing, it's not just Air India, the whole air entity. They come together, they want to know answers because they want to keep the rest of us safe.
Well, the 787 Dreamliner, this exact aircraft only, right now there are 1,100 of these in service globally. Every day around the world, they carry 500,000 passengers. That's just this aircraft type only. So you can imagine they need answers quickly in order to be able to restore trust in the aircraft.
Or would they ground that fleet of planes?
Right. Right. And of course, if they were to discover that it was something wrong with the aircraft, we've had this before with the 737 MAX, it was an immediate global grounding. Air travel does not take risks. That's why we're the safest form of transport.
Alex Macheras, I so appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed. A really helpful analysis there. Aviation analyst and consultant Alex Macheras there. To come to you very briefly, Philip Ingram, incredible detail from him and analysis, very, very helpful indeed. But the City Police Commissioner in India has said there appear to be no survivors from that Air India airline. I think, having seen that fireball, I think that perhaps that was the expectation, very sadly.
Exactly. The fireball, where it came down, the level of built up, there's no way could an aircraft land safely. And then the pieces of aircraft that there were on the ground.
Yeah, we see that footage. And 53 Brits of those 242 on board.
Exactly. And we now have to be cognizant of the number of casualties that will be in the ground and hoping that as many have survived as possible.
Absolutely. Ian Collins is here to join us. I know a lot of focus is going to be on other big stories the day back here, but of course